7 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Joe Biden delivers his State of the Union address, day 7 of the invasion of Ukraine. He told Washington, freedom will always triumph over tyranny.
Good morning. It is 6 o'clock on the 2nd of March. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
We are live across the world on your TV, your radio and online, leading the news this morning.
President Biden has used his State of the Union address in the past few hours to announce that US airspace will be closed to Russian flights, saying Putin is more isolated from the world than ever.
On the ground in Ukraine, new reports of Russian paratroopers landing in Kharkiv and a renewed bombardment of Kyiv and Zhytomyr after a US defense official announced that the convoy north of the city has stalled.
It comes after a speech by the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov prompted a mass walkout of the UN Human Rights Council.
Those are the stories leading the news. We'll have lots more to report on as well, and you can join in any of the discussions. You can email us gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet @gbnews. Well, to get us underway on this Wednesday morning and the latest from Ukraine, as usual, we cross to our security editor, Mark White, for the outlook on that. Mark.
Good morning, Eamonn. Good morning, Isabel. The very latest information we're hearing is about an assault by paratroopers, apparently in Ukraine's second city of Kharkiv. We're told that paratroopers landed in the city overnight, that there have been fierce gun battles, including around a hospital. Footage was released yesterday of a missile strike of the main headquarters, the administrative building there. We were told initially there weren't any casualties, but then they confirmed that some 10 people at least had been killed and dozens others injured. Unsurprisingly, looking at the footage that came out of the missile strike and then the aftermath, of course, of the building as well, which showed absolute destruction. And that scene has been replicated in residential areas around Ukraine's second largest city. A real, just a shocking sight of absolute destruction in these areas. There has been fierce fighting that has been taking place in Kharkiv, a battle for Kharkiv that has raged for days now. And each time that the Russians apparently try to take that city, the Ukrainian forces manage to repel them. Well, this morning again, according to Ukrainian officials, although we had reports of these Russian paratroopers arriving and fierce gun battles taking place around a hospital in Kharkiv, the very latest is that that city is still in Ukrainian control, according to local authorities in the city of Kharkiv. But there have been, and there has been, fierce fighting, and that fighting continues. As for the situation in another city, Kherson, in the south of Ukraine, the reports coming out look more concerning again. Some reports suggesting that Russian forces have taken control of Kherson in the south. That assault again took place overnight with very significant Russian forces moving in there to try to take the city of Kherson. It's a city, as I say, in the south of Ukraine with 300 or so thousand people, so a sizable city to take, and it would be the most significant advantage, I think, to the Russian forces if those reports are true. But what I will just add as a caveat, with all of these reports that come through, we hear about cities potentially falling. Then we get news back through to say, no, they've managed to repel those Russian forces. It's still in Ukrainian hands. So let's just wait as the morning progresses here to see what the actual situation is on the ground. And as for the capital city, Kiev, of course, so much attention there because of the very significant armoured division heading its way, making slow progress down to Kiev. We've had overnight bombing and missile strikes. This is a television tower in Kiev itself that was struck last night. 5 people killed there. There continues to be gunfire heard at locations around Kiev, not right in the city centre, further out into the suburbs of Kiev. But for now at least, Kiev is not under Russian control. The suggestion being that what Russia is trying to do is put a stranglehold on that city, encircling it with the many thousands of Russian troops who are slowly but surely, it seems, making their way down from Belarus in the north.
OK, Mark, thank you very much. Now, the US President Joe Biden has told Congress dictators must pay a price, announcing a ban on Russian planes in US airspace.
Well, for more on this, Professor of International Politics at the University of Birmingham, Scott Lucas, this morning. Scott, I don't know what you made of the speech, the delivery of the State of the Nation speech from Joe Biden, but I was actually surprised that Russia hadn't already been banned from US airspace.
Eamonn, that's because it's not just the U.S. acting against Ukraine. We're seeing a very coordinated response to this. So the U.S. is making sure, for example, that you get the European Union being very prominent and European states, as well as countries like Japan, Canada, and Australia. So what you will have noticed is that over the course of the past 48 hours, European after European state closed their airspace to the Russians, and then the U.S. followed. You might have noticed that the European Union, as well as European states, declared asset freezes to prevent Russian banks from operating abroad. The U.S. then followed that. I think the Biden administration is being very conscious that this just can't simply be Washington versus Moscow. So in many respects, it's the world leads and America is alongside it.
Give us some context for people who aren't aware of how much resistance there has been from the States, and I suppose you could say the same about the UK, against imposing sanctions for the last 20 years or so. I mean, it's a huge gear change from the West, isn't it? And quite rightly so, but just give us a sense of how much resistance there has been to this.
Yeah, I think that at the top, what you had was the hope for various administrations, all the way back to George W. Bush, who said, I looked into Vladimir Putin's soul and apparently found God, to the Obama administration, which tried to have a reset with Russia. There's been sort of a lack of decision when it comes to key moments. For example, the Russian assault on Syria, which has killed tens of thousands of civilians and which could be replicated in Ukraine. I think Joe Biden, who was part of the Biden administration, part of the Obama administration, I think he recognizes, and his official recognizes, they were far too weak in responding to Russia's annexation of Crimea, seizing part of Ukrainian territory. And I think in a rare point of agreement, Republicans are alongside Democrats on that. So I think it's that failure to really recognize how far Vladimir Putin would go, really for the past 15 years, that is explaining now why it's not just Joe Biden, but it's actually the U.S. system as a whole that is beginning, perhaps belatedly, to take necessary action.
Necessary action, you say in the past, Biden's been far too weak. Just want to know what you took away from his address last night. I mean, I look at this and these words, these sound bites. Freedom will always triumph over tyranny. They're just words, doesn't mean anything, and it's probably not true.
Oh, welcome to my country. Everybody's going to talk about freedom, democracy, and the wonderful American cupcakes you can eat. That's what each president does. Let's cut to the substance when you get past that rhetoric. It's not the speech that America wants. It's the speech that America needs. And by that I mean, look, Republicans, except for action on Ukraine, are going to object to anything that the Biden administration is pursuing. I think many Democrats would have wanted Biden to restate the grand programs like Build Back Better, the social environmental programs. That's not going to happen because of Republican instruction. So when I say it's the speech that America needs, look, every country in the world is going to hit by inflation because of supply chain issues, rising oil and gas prices. So Biden set out, I think, a practical way forward, which says, look, we are going to face inflation. This is what we need to do it. Every country is trying to overcome or at least contain coronavirus, despite the resistance of anti-vaxxers and coronavirus deniers. Biden, I think, again, has said, we haven't won this battle, but we are continuing it. And I think, again, rather than trying to get the grand historic programs like Build Back Better, the attempt, for example, to deal with issues like child poverty and healthcare, and at least he's talking about a practical way forward. No one's going to be completely satisfied with the speech, but in many respects, that's a testament to the fact that it wasn't playing ideology, but a just key way on what we need to do to get through this year.
And look, Professor, I know you're based in the UK, obviously an American here, but with this expertise in American politics as well and foreign politics. Are you able to give us a sense of what the mood is in the States? I mean, here in the UK, it seems to be cross-party. There seems to be widespread support of the sanctions. Indeed, many Brits wishing we were taking more refugees, for example. Can the same be said then in the States? Is there bipartisan support for what Biden was announcing in terms of going after the oligarchs and the no-fly zone in America?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And at a general level, you're seeing a very divided America, divided not just between Democrats and Republicans, but between Trumpists and other factions, coming together, as the world has, to support the Ukrainian people. And I think, in a sense, that's limiting the domestic division that has really marked America, not just for the Biden years, but has marked America really going back decades. And I think as long as Ukraine continues to resist and we see Russia being checked, we'll see that bipartisan approach supporting the administration, except for a couple of far-right figures, QAnon support, conspiracy theorists who heckled Biden last night, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert. I think my country has been stalled on politics for far too long. I think it's stagnated. I don't think it's been very practical. But the Ukraine issue, in many respects, is patching up a lot of the wounds that we've suffered.
It's still helping Donald Trump. He's not keeping quiet on what's being said. I mean, he's in there saying, no country was invaded on his watch, for instance, and that he had this direct line to President Putin. So he's certainly taking advantage of the momentum.
Well, he's trying to, Eamonn. But I think, first of all, beyond the fact that Putin did try to undermine Ukraine on Trump's watch, something we can talk about later, when Donald Trump calls Vladimir Putin a genius, which he did, he's on the wrong side of America for a number of reasons. I think Donald Trump now, in part because of the limit on social media, in part because sometimes he's off the rails, he's off to the side now. Far more important are those politicians, almost all Republicans, who think they can use Trump's tactics to get into office or to stay in office in Congress. I'm talking about House members like Jim Jordan, Matt Gaetz. I'm talking about wannabe senators like J.D. Vance in Ohio. It's those guys who are using Trumpist rhetoric who I think we should watch, especially since this is the year of congressional elections, rather than the guy who's down in Mar-a-Lago in Florida.
I just want to ask you, I don't know if you saw Prime Minister Boris Johnson was not pounced upon, but he was sort of put under pressure by Ukrainian yesterday at a press conference in Warsaw. And the question, I suppose, to you, directed at not just the UK government, but I suppose we can put it at the States as well, is that whether or not we're taking the right strategy in handling all of this, when we've made this country give up its nuclear weapons in return and promise for defence. And there she was saying our children are being bombed, they're being blown up, there's no safe zone, this is war crimes. Are the West getting this right? Or do you think that there is a strong case, as Putin's today threatening to attack Kiev with shells, to try and take a different approach? Perhaps the no-fly zone needs to be back on the table, for example.
Belatedly, I think we are taking the right approach. Look, nuclear weapons are an aside. We have nuclear weapons, but there's no way we can use nuclear weapons without tripping World War III. The UK, the US, Europe, regrettably cannot send in military forces for a direct confrontation with Russia, including, and I say this with regret, sending in our planes to enforce a no-fly zone, because again, it rests the direct confrontation. Putin will use that. He'll use that to say he's the victim. So what do we have to do? We have to provide the military aid for Ukrainians to resist, which is what they're doing. We have to provide the economic sanctions to put the squeeze on Russia. And we have to take the political measures. And I favor Ukraine becoming a member of the European Union. And we are only at the start of that process, but it is one to be watched.
Quickly, can that be expedited out of interest? Because Zelensky called for this 2 days ago. There's widespread support for it. But, I mean, these things are famously slow in the EU, aren't they? And what difference will it make?
Any application for membership takes years in the EU, but to see the EU already approve Ukraine's candidacy and say it will discuss it this month, that's historic to move that quickly. And even if it doesn't happen, it's a really powerful symbol to Putin. Because when Putin attacked Ukraine, it was not just simply to cut it off from NATO. It was to cut it off from Europe and to cut it off from the EU. In some respects, he fears the EU even more than NATO. So that's a big step. At the end of the day, when you've got a bully, when you've got an aggressor who thinks that Ukraine should be part of a greater Russia, you cannot stop him from waging a war on terror. But you can begin to respond in broader ways, not directly taking him on the bombing and on the missile attacks, but on the political and economic steps where Russia might occupy the country, but it will not win the country. It will not win Ukraine. And eventually hope that those around Putin, and indeed the Russian people, say, this war in Ukraine, to occupy it, is not worth it at the cost of destroying our own.
Well, tell you what they could destroy. They could destroy that 40-mile convoy sitting stalled, making its way to Kiev. And I look, Scott, and I think, why? I mean, we arm Ukraine. Why aren't we arming them with attack drones on this? Turkey has been doing this to a certain degree. I mean, I don't know what size of air force Ukraine has, but they must have some sort of planes. And you've got a convoy going absolutely nowhere with fuel, with food, with logistics, with backup personnel. Why is nobody taking it out? It's just sitting there.
Great question, and it's one that I discussed with military intelligence analysts last night at length. And here's what we were trying to put together. It appears that that 40-mile convoy, which was there to get headlines, does not have Russia's best troops. It has a lot of conscripts. That it has not Russia's best equipment, it has bog standard equipment. So in a sense, it's a decoy to take attention away from what Putin is really doing. In other words, the key forces right now are the convoys that are much smaller, but that have tried to advance on Kiev, and they have been attacked. The key forces are those who this morning are trying to enter Kharkiv, including the Russian paratroopers, and those are the ones that you want to attack. So in other respects, that 40-mile convoy was almost a distraction, it appears, because it has not moved for days. And instead of focusing on that 40-mile convoy, use your resources, which are there, but which are limited, to really focus on the Russian forces, his top forces. Because Russia's Achilles heel right now is that many of its forces are having supply problems and logistics problems to even move. And if most of the troops can't move, focus on the ones who can.
Okay, Scott, well explained. Thank you very much indeed for that. Scott Lucas is a professor of American Studies at the University of Birmingham. Thanks very much for your time and your analysis, Scott. Much appreciated.
Many thanks. Take care.
Thank you.
Now, President Zelensky's asked the world, what is the point of saying never again for 80 years if the world stays silent when a bomb drops on the same site of Babin Yar? That is, of course, the Holocaust memorial. It says history is repeating itself.
Let's bring you up to date now with the other headlines you're waking up to this Wednesday morning. Ukraine's defense ministry says it has evidence that Russian ally Belarus is preparing to send troops into Ukraine. The ministry said that Belarusian forces have been brought into combat readiness and are concentrated close to the northern border.
Later today at PMQs, Boris Johnson will update MPs on his talks with allies in Eastern Europe as the UK looks to add more pressure on Russia over the invasion. The Foreign Office is also expected to announce further financial sanctions on Moscow banks and to ban all Russian-linked ships from docking at UK ports.
America has joined the European Union and Canada in closing airspace to Russian planes. The US Justice Department is also looking to seize yachts, luxury apartments and private jets belonging to wealthy Russians with ties to President Putin.
In other news, a 15-year-old girl has been seriously injured in a shooting incident in Liverpool. Merseyside police responded to reports of gunfire in Toxteth just after 5 p.m. last night. A 21-year-old man's been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder.
A report by the Clean Air Fund suggests World Health Organization's air pollution targets could be achieved in Britain by 2030 if environmental policies are delivered on. Campaigners say it would be a win-win, helping to cut infant deaths, reduce coronary heart disease and benefit the economy.
A new survey suggests almost 2 million people may have paid for private healthcare during the pandemic instead of waiting for the NHS. The Institute for Public Policy Research found nearly 16 million people had difficulty accessing NHS services, with 12% opting to go private instead.
Scientists from Imperial College London have discovered a new treatment that could potentially extend the lives of people with severe brain tumours. Breakthrough drug makes tumours more responsive to radiotherapy, which means they'll be kept at bay for much longer.
Childline is launching a new mental health campaign aimed at boys after the NSPCC found they were more than twice as likely to take their own lives than girls. The counselling service hopes that by putting the spotlight on males, they can help them understand that they are not alone.
The government has announced a £260 million investment in medical research and drug manufacturing. The Department of Health says patients will benefit from cutting-edge advances in treatments, ensuring the UK is at the forefront of medical research. Guys, just want to say to you, there is a poll today, a survey that has been published in the papers today, and it says that Britain's gifts to the world, what are Britain's best gifts to the world? And the top three are, in third place, Sir David Attenborough, in second place, roast dinners, and in first place, fish and chips.
Yes, see, I find that surprising. The royal family are way down at, well, the Queen's number 10 and the royal family as a whole are 16. Things like afternoon tea way down there. But yeah, fish and chips, roast dinner, Sir David Attenborough, top three. Full English breakfast, number 4. The internet, number 5.
Well, the internet, yes, obviously.
Yeah, so let us know what you think. Do you think they are our best
There are
exports?
obvious omissions.
What about tea? What about Shakespeare?
Tea's from India. What are you talking about? Or
You
China?
know, Yorkshire tea. Yorkshire tea, it's in
They
there.
don't grow tea in Yorkshire.
Well, it's a...
What? What?
So Yorkshire tea's in there. I'm trying to find what number. It's number 23.
Those tea plantations in Yorkshire. We must go up and visit them. What about Manchester United? I mean, we've given the world football. We've given them this most amazing
They've got foreign
team.
owners now as well.
We've got golf. We've given the world golf.
Have we? And cricket.
Probably. Yes.
That pen's really scary.
Is it?
That's a little close. We've got a fine Irish broadcaster. It's not Great Britain. Oh, Northern Ireland, of course. Yeah.
Harry Potter.
Yes, Harry Potter, definitely.
I've given them minis, cars, Range Rovers.
We're off now, aren't we? Yeah, Range Rovers.
You think, oh, and incidentally, the pneumatic tyre, Dunlop.
Dyson Hoovers. I love a Dyson Hoover.
Tarmac Adam. Yes. See, Scotland.
JCBs. Oh gosh, we're off.
We're off, yes, but I do think and what's his name who built all the bridges? Isambard Kingdom Brunel.
Brunel, the railways.
And who did who did the trains? Who invented the steam train?
Brunel, wasn't it? Oh, sorry.
No, he did the bridges. Was it not Stevenson?
Well, now you're testing me. Oh gosh.
Or did he write Treasure Island? No, there was a Stevenson who did the steam train.
Is there? I'll take your word for it.
I think who was it?
Somebody Trevithick, I'm being told.
Never heard of him. Richard Trevithick. No, we don't never heard of him. But
well, for me, it's the royal family, number one. Shakespeare, number two. And fish and chips. No one likes fish and chips outside of Britain. How can that be our best export?
Because when you're abroad, everybody likes a wee bit of fish and chips.
Do they?
You like?
I mean, they like it here, but we don't really export it. I don't know. Well, anyway.
Well, it's there for the world.
We need a bit of levity.
Choose.
We want something to smile about this morning. So tell us what you think is our proudest
or
export.
Just most unusual or funniest. Tweet us at GBNews, GBviews at GBnews.uk. People are tweeting me and they're saying, why does Eamonn keep looking off to read those addresses? Because that's what
let's
they are.
Let's move the print out and put it under there.
It would be too obvious to put them in front of me here, so we do it over there. So that's why Eamonn ends up doing that. That's it. Anyway, we're going to take a break and we're going to be back talking more about Ukraine right after this.
Good morning. A rather drab Wednesday for most of the country. Rain and drizzle on and off in many places as well, but western parts of Scotland will again enjoy some cracking sunshine. We've had high pressure nearby. It's starting to pull away though, and this low is taking over. It's been bringing cloud and rain up from the south through the night, making for a very different day today across North Wales, especially the North Midlands, rain trickling into northwest England and Northern Ireland. Clouding over across central and southern Scotland through the day, but we should hang on to some good spells of sunshine across the far north. Not too much rain across eastern England, a bit damp and drizzly in places this morning, but generally just a cloudy afternoon here. And the rain should peter out across South Wales and southwest England at times. And temperatures in the southwest, 11, 12, maybe 13 Celsius. Elsewhere, we're looking at high single figures, not feeling very pleasant at 8 or 9 in Manchester with that rain on and off through the afternoon that pushes northwards across Scotland through this evening. So we will see the cloud increasing across the far north. And then another line of rain just starts to edge in from the west as we go through the early hours. And that will stick around during Thursday. But with a lot of cloud, a fairly brisk breeze, it isn't going to be a cold night, a much milder night, certainly tonight across Scotland compared to the night just gone. There will still be rain around, though, on Thursday, a fairly soggy start across Scotland. Then this line of rain sitting across northwest England, East Wales and the Midlands. Some uncertainty about exactly where that's going to lie tomorrow, but it will bring a pretty soggy day down the central slice of the UK. Either side of that, something a bit drier and a bit brighter, and with some sunny spells. Again, double digits possible across the south, single figures likely further north. And again, if you're stuck under that rain band, it's not going to feel very pleasant. That rain will still be around into Friday, but slowly easing off. Many of us looking like having a dry weekend, but strong signals it's going to get colder through the weekend into next week.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Fast approaching 6:30, we're hearing reports that Kharkiv is under aerial attack from Russian paratroopers. Let's now speak to a resident there, Maria Avdiva, who is in that city. Maria, thanks for taking the time and talking to us. How are you feeling? How would you describe the whole situation and the weight of the world on your shoulders?
Hello, thank you for having me. So the situation here is really dangerous now and threatening. So during yesterday, Russia continued shelling the residential area, so deliberately destroying the houses, and they did it throughout the day and in the night as well. So people were not able to go out and were hiding in the shelters and the basements and the underground. And besides, Russia started to use fighter jets to bombard Kharkiv. So you could have clearly hear in the evening and during the night the sound of the bombarder jet flying near the house, and then the explosions all over the city. And now we have seen that so many houses are damaged in ruins, and we do not have any numbers yet about the confirmed deaths among civilians, but there are so many. And they also striked the dormitories of the cadets of the military universities here in Kharkiv, because it's a large city and we have 2 military universities, tank school and air fighters school. So they bombarded the places where the cadets sleep. And it continues, because in the morning I still hear the sounds of explosions throughout the city. So now people who can no longer stay here try to flee the city, because now there are so many houses destroyed and people do not have place where to stay here. And also, of course, it's needed to mention that there are shortages of food supplies, of water supplies, of medical supplies, because the city is under constant aggression from Russia. And about the paratroopers, I have no detailed information yet, because it was happening during the night, and some do confirm. Some sources say that the attack was quickly fight back, and so the hospital where these paratroopers tried to get into, so the military hospital, it is under full control of the Ukrainian military. So I think that we will have the detailed information later today.
Yeah, and Maria, just hearing you speaking, and whilst you're speaking, seeing those pictures of your proud and fantastic city reduced to rubble, unimaginable just 1 week ago, and you so composed talking to us this morning, you must personally be incredibly frightened that your own home could soon be reduced to rubble in the way that we've seen so many in the last week. Why have you decided to stay?
You know, I'm not frightened, I'm really angry, and that is what I see in the eyes of Ukrainians, because that deliberate killing of children and women which sleep in their houses, that is the war crime. and Putin is a war criminal. And what I want is as soon as possible to make him responsible for that. Him and all his commanders who give these orders, who send here troops. So I now, stay in the corridor so that I have two walls, one which is an outside wall and one is inside the apartment. So if the strike gets, the rocket gets into the house, so I'm hoping that I will be inside. But then, of course, you never can feel secure here. And the most dangerous consequences are that they are bombarding also critical infrastructure in the city. I already know that some of the houses which were not hit by the rocket, but they do not have any heating at the moment. Also, they will for sure try to destroy electricity infrastructure, water infrastructure. So that means that the city might, which is 1.5 million, and it's a large city, second largest city in Ukraine, might remain without the any necessities, and especially the heating, which is most important now because it is cold outside.
And those paratroopers landed on the ground, I mean, their role, part of it will be to secure essential services and put it in the hands of the Russians as well. So what they don't destroy, they will control. Maria, so difficult listening to you, talking to you. We wish you well. Please keep safe. And thank you for your time. Thanks for telling us your story this morning.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That's my pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Look, let's now go to our security editor, Mark White, not only on those paratroopers landing in Kharkiv, but what else have you got for us, Mark?
Yeah, I want to tell you about a couple of things. With regard to Kharkiv, where the last guest was just talking about the latest information.
We've got a bit of problem with your microphone there, just while Mark's doing that, and we'll see if we can just get that little link.
Can you hear me now?
Is that working now, that microphone?
We've got him. Let's cross back.
Yeah, do apologise about that. You think after 22 years in television I'd know that by now. But anyway, a couple of things I want to tell you about. With regard to Kharkiv, where your last guest was obviously talking about the situation on the ground there. We've had it confirmed from the Ukrainian authorities in that city that some 21 people have died in the recent shelling and missile strikes. 112 civilians have been injured in that city. With regard to the paratroopers landing in Kharkiv, the latest information again from Ukrainian government officials on the ground is that they are in control of the city still, that the Ukrainians, I should say, are still in control. There was a battle around a military hospital in Kharkiv, but according, as say, to the Ukrainian military government, they have managed to fight off those Russian troops, paratroopers who landed in the city. I also want to tell you about a very worrying situation in Zhytomyr, which is a city just west of the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, a city of about 260,000 people. Some horrific imagery coming out that, according to local officials there and the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, is a residential area, including a maternity hospital that was struck by Russian missiles. The latest information is that 4 people are dead there, including a child. So a maternity hospital among the buildings struck in this residential area by Russian missile or missiles. Now there is, we should add, a nearby air base, a Ukrainian air base there, the 95th Airborne Brigade that is based there. And it may be that the Russian missiles were trying to strike that base and it hit the residential area instead. We've no way of confirming that. The Russians say for their part that they are not deliberately targeting residential areas. But in contrast to that claim, you only need to look at the situation around Ukraine, at residential areas that have been struck multiple times in Kharkiv, in Kherson, around Kiev itself, and of course now Zhytomyr, which is to the west of the capital, Kiev. So very worrying images that are coming out of the city of Zhytomyr, with reports that a maternity hospital has been struck, 4 dead, including a child.
OK, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. OK, stay with us. We're going to take a quick break. After that, we'll look at your Wednesday morning newspapers. Today, we're joined by David Mellor and Claire Muldoon. See you in a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Time now to take a look through the newspapers and the stories that they are covering today and that you are waking up to.
Shunned by the world, that's what the Metro's leading with. More than 100 diplomats leaving the room as the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was speaking yesterday by video link at that Human Rights Council.
The Telegraph reports that President Zelensky is pleading with Western nations to prevent what he calls genocide.
The Mirror is leading with Volodymyr Zelensky's defiant call that nobody will break us as he spoke to the European Parliament yesterday to a standing ovation.
Times reporting on President Putin's comments that people should leave Kyiv now before a bombardment begins.
Here's the Mail. It says, pray for Kiev as a 40-mile column of tanks heads for the Ukrainian capital.
Barbaric headline in The Sun. It displays an image of a missile strike on a TV station in Kyiv.
Blitzed but never beaten, the Russian menace has failed to crush the spirit of fearless Ukrainians fighting for their homeland. That's the front page for The Express.
And here to look through the, that's the Financial Times. China has signalled it was ready to play a peacemaker role in the Ukraine conflict. Let's now go through those papers with Claire Muldoon and David Mellor. Very good to see you both there. You know, I'd just like to start, Claire, talking about Zelensky. And, this guy, want to say this, the laws of politics and whatever, he shouldn't be the president. He shouldn't have won the election. He's an entertainer. He won Strictly. He's a stand-up comic.
Comedian, yeah.
Well, he should have been classified as that. But this guy, surely he's emerged as the outstanding figure in all of this.
I completely agree. And for those listening on radio, the Mirror leads with a triumphant picture of President Zelensky sitting behind his desk with his fist in the air, almost in victory. Here is a man that encapsulates leadership. Here is a man that gives direction, that gives authority, that people can look up to. You know, regardless of his sex, let's not even bring that into it. But here is a man who is showing wonderful commitment to the cause and showing wonderful leadership in leading his country to stand up against bullies. And I think the best thing is Putin will not be liking the fact that everybody is anti-Putin at the moment, but praising
the
President
contrast
Zelensky.
is
the contrast,
stark, isn't it? And it's
absolutely.
The charisma of a leader during a situation like this, David Miller, is of course incredibly important in winning hearts and minds.
Well, I suppose it comes the hour, comes the man / woman. You see, just the detour for a moment. This has saved Boris's skin.
Yeah.
And he's actually having quite a good war. He's actually speaking things that a lot of people want to hear, whereas a lot of the other fumblers in the EU and in America are just not really making any kind of impact at all. Zelensky's a very interesting thing. He won by accident because the previous... I mean, Ukraine has had its issues, and one of its issues has been deep-dyed corruption, and all its political leaders have been corrupt in one form or another. He wins against the odds, but then his problem has been incompetence. He's been seen as not a competent leader, but suddenly there is a genuine crisis, and out he comes as somebody who he will go down in history for this. I just hope that along the way, first of all, he'll survive, and that's not at all certain. But secondly, the new authority that he has got will allow him to offer leadership to his shattered country. But, yeah, well done him. It's hard to imagine anybody doing it better, actually.
As you also said, David, though, there is a new authority associated with Boris Johnson. And one would imagine in the next few weeks, if the Metropolitan Police knock on the door of 10 Downing Street and said, here's a summons, I mean, who's interested now anymore?
Well, that's the point, isn't it? I mean, look, all this Partygate stuff is pretty pathetic to run, you know, number 10 like a sort of cheap bar. And I've said to you before, and I'll only briefly say, in Margaret Thatcher's time, you know, I was one of her ministers for 9 years. If I'd gone in and having a bottle of booze in the garden of number 10, my time in office would be very short indeed. But it now looks like yesterday. It now looks also like trivia.
It's almost like fish and chip newspaper, isn't it, for the next day? It is completely trivia, and I don't think that the public actually care much more about it anymore.
But the point is, you know, I can remember as a kid wandering up the road near our house and thinking, is there going to be a nuclear war? Because that was the Cuban Missile Crisis. I know all you young people wouldn't remember any of that, but I sadly do. And suddenly, out of a clear blue sky, it would appear, we're back with a serious threat of some kind of nuclear conflict. And I think a lot of the other crap has got to be forgotten along the way now.
Yes. Right. What's going to happen to Kyiv next? Putin says, get out now because we're going to bomb.
Well, this is the problem. Is Putin rational? Is he in contact with people who will tell him what he doesn't want to hear? And I think the terrible thing about Putin is, you know, this business sitting at the end of that, it's almost beyond satire, sitting at the end of one of these long tables.
Yeah, that table.
People having to be locked up for 2 weeks before they can see him, and then going down some corridor where all kinds of awful things are sprayed all over them. This man is a Looney Tune. Now, the question is he loony enough to do something absolutely dreadful? And I think the answer is he is. He's already doing absolutely dreadful things, killing civilians. Look, it's against international law to kill civilians. Even during Hitler's war, the Geneva Conventions were honoured. But the point is, who is going to take that ball and deliver it to Putin? The danger is there isn't much authority from the UN. What there is the people, the usual suspects, Boris, Biden, all saying he shouldn't be attacking civilians, and he shouldn't. But the worry is, where is the authority? You know, you take a country like India, which used to always think of itself as the conscience of the world. They abstained on that vote. And you think it's the non-aligned countries who should be going to Putin saying, you cannot kill civilians in this way.
It's really
and
interesting.
they're not doing it.
No, I was going to say the Financial Times, I think, was the paper that we saw on the front pages, which shows that China has come forward as a sort of unlikely peacekeeper in all this. I mean, they're one of the only countries that didn't walk out from that human rights conference yesterday in Geneva, and they're offering to at least try and be arbitrators. I mean, obviously, there's lots of questions about their own human rights record when you have to look at the Uyghurs, but could they play an important role, Claire? What do you think about that?
I don't think they can, and I think it's a very dangerous role know if China are engaged in any shape or form.
They're Russia's mates.
Well, they are, of course.
That's
they
the
are.
point.
They're propping up geographically, financially, and emotionally the whole of Russia at the moment.
And they're getting ready to invade Taiwan, most probably.
Yes. Plus,
so I mean, on that point, if there was this sort of cozy up between Putin and Xi a few weeks ago, if the Chinese are backing off, that might be a way of getting to Putin, because he was so proud of that suggestion that he and Xi were going to run the world together. Some way has got to be found of stopping Putin doing something ridiculous and dangerous and potentially catastrophic.
Well, what are you saying? Take him out?
I think if it were possible, that would be a serious option, and I bet you it is being considered. But the point is, what will happen is quite clear, and that is that such is the constraints now on the Russian economy, the collapse of the ruble, people queuing for ATMs. All his mates who like to live billionaires' lives in Britain suddenly finding it's not so easy to do so. But this takes time. Look, at a certain point, it's Rasputin, the mad monk. He had too much influence over the Tsarina, and in the end, he was assassinated.
Right.
But it takes time for that to happen.
He's warning, isn't he, to people to get out of Kiev. Last train has already departed. This is being reported in the front of The Guardian. Awful scene, so evocative of the Second World War, seeing refugees packed into trains.
I mean, it is, but, it's and scenes of, the Titanic as well. Women and children first, then women, and then the others. So, again, there's the sense of us and the others. There's othering going on. There's survival of the fittest. It's all very strange, very awful. And to think this is happening in this day and age is just preposterous.
It's preposterous. And it seems, somehow trivial for us to talk about other events. I mean, I know the viewers are torn between whether we stand and cover Ukraine and the effects of it, or we deal with other news. And one of the other news stories I want to go to is, this is in page 16
the MPs
of the Guardian.
Increase.
So there's an MP pay increase that we're talking about. I'm one of these people, I honestly never have a problem with this. I think they're underpaid from the start. I think you have to stand in their shoes. Here's a former one beside you here, and you see what they do and how they do. I think that's the thing, David. We never really hear the full job, the full responsibility of what an MP does. However, I'm going to hear from Claire now as to an extra $2,000 a year.
It's 2.7p increase, and it's equivalent to £2,200 per annum on a salary that's existing of £86,000. Plus all the extra things that MPs can claim for. I don't have an issue with that either. The only thing that jars with me is that MPs initially coming out and saying, or the people from the Bank of England saying, if you're offered a pay rise, don't take it, because we need to get a hold on inflation.
Well, I'd like the people who haven't taken the pay rise that they were offered to get in touch with us today, but I reckon the amount would be, the amount of people would be nil.
And given that as well, on the back of the TfL strike at the moment that's hitting London really hard, that I don't think's doing themselves any favours.
So what you're saying is now is not the time?
Is it ever the time?
It's never the time.
It's never, it's never the right time.
It's never the time. But you see, first of all, I don't feel too sorry for MPs, because when I was a member of Parliament, there were very little in the way of expenses. Now the expenses...
but there are now.
Exactly. The expenses are so ridiculous that actually I think it leads to corruption, and it has led to corruption.
Right. So you would be in favour of a higher net pay packet rather than the expenses?
Yeah, but then you see, call me old-fashioned, but in the old days, members of Parliament went to Parliament as representatives of their communities. They did not go as a full-time career. Today we have this rather ghastly, sort of creepy individual on both sides who goes to university, then becomes a researcher for some MP or trades union or whatever. And then they become an MP. They know nothing of the world, and that becomes their career. Personally, I think we were much better off when MPs were more rooted in other ways of life.
I'm just curious, lastly, just a yes or no answer, whether you think that this announcement has come out because we are so distracted on other things. Call me deeply cynical, but do you think this is a good time to bury a story that could potentially be incredibly unpopular?
I think that's not a bad thought.
It's also
the more cynical you are, the more likely you are to be right. This is the thing.
OK, David Mellett, Claire Muldoon, more from you in an hour. Thank you very much indeed.
Let's go back to our top story on Ukraine. When I can speak to a Ukrainian member of parliament on this, and that is Kira Rudik there. Kira, you probably heard about, there's only one story in town around the world, basically, and that is your country. What would you like to add to what we have been saying?
Hello, good morning. Thank you for having me. Well, I'm happy to say that today is the 7th day of war, and Putin has not gotten any major victory. He has tried, oh boy, he has tried to take our cities, but he was not be able to take any. This happened.
Kira, could I just ask you? We've got a picture of you here. I mean, you're a member of Parliament there, and let's see that picture of Kira with the machine gun. We've got you standing there with the machine gun. Could I ask you, are you actually prepared to pull the trigger? Could you kill someone?
Well, I'm training to be able to do it, so I have it with me, and my resistance crew is training along with me right now, so we would be able to protect ourselves. We know exactly what Putin is capable of and what his soldiers are capable of. And I'm not letting this happen to my family, my home, my city, and my country. And I will be protecting it for as long as it will be needed.
An incredibly brave woman, and we really admire you for taking the time to talk to us in this difficult situation. Look, your ambassador here in London yesterday suggested that he thinks Putin's strategy is to do a siege, starve and surrender of the capital. Obviously, you're having to prepare for that eventuality. How long do you think you'll be able to survive in that situation? Your president yesterday suggesting it could result in genocide.
So, yes, we all know that Putin's strategy could be to siege the city. That's why we are getting ready to that. We are preparing for 7-day supplies of food, water, warm clothes, foam batteries, and everything that is needed. Yesterday, I was patrolling the city to figure out if the other units are ready to that. And I could tell you, yes, we have enough of stuff, and we are getting more and more supplies to be able to survive the siege. We understand that Putin has nothing that could stop him except for the bravery of Ukrainian people and the support of our international partners.
Well, that support goes a certain distance and then it stops. Yesterday we had all this talk of why NATO, why the West are not implementing a no-fly zone. Can you understand why they are not?
Well, this is heartening because this is the only single thing that we do really need right now. And NATO doesn't want to get themselves into the Third World War. But when I'm talking to generals, to presidents, to diplomats, what I'm suggesting is do the Russian tactics. Help and support us, and then let them prove that it was NATO forces.
Interesting. Something else, Kira, I want to speak to you about. I mean, as a politician, as a member of your parliament, you are in opposition to President Zelensky. He is all over. I could hold up any newspaper today here in Britain. He is on the front pages. He has emerged with incredible credit, incredible charisma around the world. Will this carry on after this invasion? I mean, would you continue to support him? What do you think of the job that your president is doing?
So again, 7 days ago, I was one of the harshest critics of president and his actions. However, right now he's doing a really great job, and we are supporting him in full in all the matters that he's doing to be with the country and to protect the country. We will see how the things go during the peacetime, because we all know there are leaders of the wartime and there are leaders of the peacetime. So right now, I think what we need to give him, instead of thinking of what will be in the farthest future, our full support in the nearest future, to make sure that he has the strength, the motivation, and enough of health to push back Putin and his forces.
OK, we have to leave it there. Kira Rudik, a member of the Golos opposition party in the Ukraine Parliament. Really good to talk to you this morning. Thank you so much, and we wish you to stay safe.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Look, we'll hit the break, back with all the top stories, top of the hour right after this.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis, and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here.
Joe Biden walking out.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
Joe Biden delivers his State of the Union address on day 7 of the invasion of Ukraine. He told Washington freedom will always triumph over tyranny.
A very good morning to you. It is exactly 7 o'clock on this, the 2nd of March. It is a Wednesday. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
We're live across the whole of the UK on your TV, your radio and online. Here's what's leading the news this morning.
In his State of the Union address, President Biden has stated that Putin is more isolated from the world than ever. Later in the programme, we'll speak to the man dubbed Putin's #1 enemy, Bill Browder.
On the ground in Ukraine, new reports this morning of Russian paratroopers landing in Kharkiv and a renewed bombardment of Kiev and Zhytomyr after a US defence official announced that the convoy north of the city has stalled.
It comes after a speech by the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, prompted a mass walkout at the UN Human Rights Council.
Don't forget you can join in any of our discussions by emailing gbviews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
Right, straight away, and as usual, we get a roundup of the latest from Ukraine. Here's our security editor, Mark White. Mark, good morning.
Well, we're hearing about another devastating missile strike on Kharkiv, the second largest city in Ukraine. Now, I'm told that this is a missile strike that has hit the Karazin National University School of Sociology. There are images that have been released by the Interior Ministry in Ukraine that shows that building alight, and we'll endeavour to get those images to you when we receive them. But it certainly looks like another significant strike, and those images now just released showing that building on fire. This is not far from the government buildings in Kharkiv that was struck to such devastating effect yesterday with the loss of 10 lives and dozens more who were injured. So another airstrike right into the capital, right into the centre, I should say, of Kharkiv. Missile attacks, strikes came in and shelling last night, according to local officials in Kharkiv, hitting residential areas in that city as paratroopers, Russian paratroopers, also mounted an attack in Kharkiv overnight. There was intense fighting around a military hospital, but the latest, according to Ukrainian officials, is that they have managed to continue with controlling the city, that they have repelled those incursions by Russian paratroopers. The local governor in Kharkiv said that some 21 people had been killed and 112 others had been injured. Some more really worrying imagery that has come out from Ukrainian government sources shows the aftermath of a missile strike on the city of Zhytomyr, which is about 100 or so miles west of the capital, Kiev. Devastating fires in a residential area. Now, according to local officials in the city of Zhytomyr, a maternity hospital was struck. There are reports so far of 4 dead, including a child, but officials have been looking under the rubble, understandably, looking for survivors caught up in that attack. Now, there is a military air base nearby, the 95th Airborne Brigade, not far from this location. It may be that the Russians were looking to target that area. Certainly they have said previously that they do not attack residential areas, but the Ukrainian government says that there has been a shift in tactics of late, that the Russian military has been deliberately targeting residential areas. They have described this as a genocide. As far as Kiev, the capital city, is concerned, well, there has been missile strikes. There have been sporadic gunfire and sirens going off again this morning. These air raid sirens are a regular occurrence in the capital city. A television mast was among the targets for Russian missile strikes yesterday, and a very ominous and worrying warning from the Russians as well to the people of the capital city of Ukraine to get out of the capital. The concern is that the Russian military is about to launch a devastating attack on the capital. Certainly that warning apparently coming from the Russian military, from the Russian government, that people in the capital should leave that area now. Now, all that is just going to add to the refugee crisis on the border. The very latest breaking news that we're getting from the Polish government is that 450,000 refugees have now crossed the border into Poland from Ukraine. 450,000 just in one country. But remember, others are crossing into Romania and into Slovakia and into Hungary. There were, last reports, according to the UN High Commission for Refugees, some 7 million people displaced internally in Ukraine. In other words, fleeing the worst of the fighting. Many of them may well be heading for what they see as safer territory over the border in these Baltic nations. A growing humanitarian crisis on top of the horrific bombardments that we're now seeing in key cities around Ukraine.
Indeed, and we're just going to continue to bring you some of those pictures. What you're looking at there, as Mark pointed out, these are Czechs. This is the border between Ukraine and Romania. And the refugee figure, of course, rises all the time. Yesterday it was being reported around 500,000 people crossing the border at various points from Ukraine into other European countries.
And the most dark thing, a lot of the pictures that you'll see at these border crossings is, of course, it's only women and children who are being allowed to flee the country. Men, of course, between the ages of 18 and 60 have been conscripted, told they must stay and fight. Of course, most of them doing so willingly. And lots of scenes of tearful departures as men are driving their families to the border before returning to Ukraine to fight, to give blood, to do whatever it takes to defend their country. We're keeping our cameras on that border in Romania with Ukraine throughout the course of the morning.
And every one of those vehicles has a story. Let's now hear from Major General Chip Chapman, former head of counter-terrorism at the Ministry of Defence. Chip, good to talk to you again.
Morning, Eamonn.
This morning, it's Russian paratroopers landing in Ukraine, putting boots on the ground, specialist boots on the ground. What would their role be? I mean, they're not just going in there to shoot, the opposing army or innocent civilians. What would their tactics be?
Well, they've gone in there because what the operational objective is to join Kharkiv along with Mariupol to have the first part of left bank Ukraine, that is the bit to the east of the Dnieper River. So they'll draw a line there. That's the first segmentation of Ukraine that the Russians seek. What we have to say, though, is that in terms of force ratios, we always look at 3 to 1 being you need 3 attackers for every one defender. Whether they can get that sort of ratio is up for grabs. And I think that's the same problem when we come to Kyiv or Kiev. I'm going to try and call it Kyiv now because that's what the Ukrainians do. So the 40-mile long convoy there is supposed to have 15,000 men in terms of combat power. Now, that is the size of the force that was committed to Fallujah to take a small city which had largely been abandoned in 2004, which they only had 2,000 to 4,000 defenders there. So the Russians are going to get a bloody nose from highly motivated defenders, I think.
But, Chip, what I still don't understand, I got another explanation for it today, and the theory seems to be that convoy, sitting duck, it is just allowed to sit there because it's not seen as an immediate threat. There are other more specialised forces making advances for which the Ukrainian Air Force, whatever size it is, I'm not really sure, concentrates on, and their troop movements concentrate on tackling those. But meanwhile, surely you've got all those assets sitting there. What sort of statement would it make to send drones in there, to send aircrafts and wipe out 14 miles of vehicles?
Well, you're absolutely right, because one of the things that we're seeing is that the mud of spring, as they call it in Ukraine, seems to have confined the Russians largely to the roads and highways. They're not using, as we normally would in military tactics, maneuver corridors and avenues of approach. Now, you can look at it in various ways. Maybe it is that the Ukrainian Air Force is now non-effective. If that is the case, then that will aid the Russians significantly, because if they do establish air superiority, that will A, enable Kyiv to be pounded, and B, it will allow the maneuver forces to maneuver, because having air power and air cover is significant. But in doctrinal terms, having a column that length is something that you really want to try and chew to bits. But at the same time, the Americans are saying it's stalled. And if you're stalled, you're consuming your own combat power. So each army has a number of days of supply, a number of days of annual expenditure rate for ammunition. So you're consuming your own goods. And that's why the Americans are also talking about low morale amongst the Russian troops. But two things can be true at the same time. You can have heroic defense, and you can still have a massive combat power available to the Russians. And every day, I think I keep saying that more has been committed. And now we think that 80% of the Russian combat power is across the border and likely to be committed. That's up from 1/3, 33%, about 4 days ago. It is only the 7th day, D+6 in military terms. So an ounce of optimism is worth more than a general reserve.
And just before we let you go, Major General Chip Chapman, I just want to get your analysis of what the ambassador to London, Vadim Prosenko, was saying yesterday about how he thinks Putin's strategy now is siege, starve and surrender for the capital. And Zelensky saying yesterday, if that is the case, it will lead to the genocide of millions of Ukrainians. Is that going to be the grounds for the West to perhaps do more in terms of our response? Is there any way, for example, we can create a safe zone for civilians like you've often seen in other war situations?
I think that is a tactic, and the Russians have got form here in Syria, which I've studied in great detail. So you circle a place, you starve it, you bomb the grid, and eventually you give them a choice to evacuate or reconcile. Now, they will try and do one of those because, again, this is what we call the escalation paradox. When you escalate both in weapons, targets, operating areas in order to increase your negotiating position for a future ceasefire. So I'm sure it will be there. The Ukrainians will not be for them at all.
Well, Chip, we're just beginning to lose our signal for you. We caught the gist of most of what you were saying there. It's always good to have you on the programme, Major General. Thank you very much indeed. We'll have to leave it there.
And the Major General made a point of saying there, as you will have noticed, I mean, we would have been educated in calling Kiev, but apparently in Ukraine they pronounce their capital city Kyiv. We're going to find out now from Oksana, who actually lives there. We join her live now. Oksana, Kyiv, the correct pronunciation?
Kyiv, exactly. Hi.
Well, that's what we'll do. That's what we'll do from here on in. And Kiev is a Russian influence, is it, on that word?
No, Russian has no influence on Kiev. They try to concentrate the troops and to attack Kiev, but at the present moment, our air defense and military, they work perfectly, because sitting here in the Kiev, I remain in Kiev and will remain till the end of the war, with my children, with my family. We feel rather safe, safe, so safe as it can be in the time of war, but in Kharkiv, in Boyarka, and in Mariupol, people are terrified and they try to escape, try to hide. And here in Kiev, yes, we have attacks. We have nearby the whole day and night long air raid sirens. But nevertheless, we feel rather safe. I hope it stays so, because Kiev is the heart of the Ukraine. Yeah. It should be.
I hope it does.
Definitely
stay
Ukraine, no Russia, never.
We just want to know, really, have you tried to get out? You mentioned there, I just want to find out a bit more about you, who you are, why you've stayed there. Did you try to get out? And who is there in your family?
My name is Haniska Oksana. I work as procurement specialist at Bilfinger Tebedin CFI. This is international company, and also has offices in UK. I'm married, have 2 children, a son 14 years old and a daughter 10 years old. We are resident of Kiev. We were not trying to escape because I think that the people who got panic from the beginning, who was very terrified of the beginning of the war, they should had a chance to leave the country, because panic is also a very big factor in the war. The people who are panicked by themselves, they share this panic. And these people, they should go from the country to the safe places where they can feel safe, where they can stay till the end of the war, and do not make panic the people around. Because many people in Ukraine, they are strong, they are not frightened, and they are ready to fight till the end. Well, Oksana, the last drop of blood, if it will be needed.
And Oksana, that is
with my family. Till now, nobody needs our help. Okay, we donate money. We try to help with driving services for people who need this. We have a car. and it stays here near our house, so we can do this when anybody need it. But for our family, that was not the choice. We will stay with our country, and when our people, the people of Ukraine, will need our help. Sorry, maybe it sounds we're small people, but from small people, each population, each nation is done. Everybody should do the input into victory. This is my opinion and the opinion of my husband.
You are amazing. You are amazing talking to you, Oksana, and you know, from your day job as a procurement manager, and now you say we are small people, but you're very big in heart and attitude, and very, very brave, and you don't have to be there, and you are. And thank you. Just stay safe, and really appreciate you talking to us and explaining your story this morning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Goodness
Bye-bye.
me, goodness me.
Unbelievable. That's been the overriding impression throughout the last week, that everyone that we've been speaking to is the overwhelming sense of stoicism, of bravery, of absolute determination.
They think they're going to win.
Positivity. It's absolutely breathtaking.
You think if you were in that situation, she's very similar to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Oksana.
She's very similar to you in terms of age and
She's a mum.
2 children and all that sort of thing. You would imagine you'd be on the first car or train out of there.
Certainly my kids would, and that's a difficult decision. I'm sure
if your
every
kids were,
parent,
you'd be with them.
Although there is just this huge rage that so many people are feeling. We spoke in the last hour to a resident saying she just feels anger, and a lot of people are motivated by that. Look, it's a developing story. We've got lots more Ukrainian voices to bring you throughout the morning. We're going to take a look now at the rest of the morning's headlines at 7:18.
Later today, at Prime Minister's Questions, Boris Johnson will update MPs on his talks with allies in Eastern Europe as Britain looks to add more pressure on Russia over the invasion. The Foreign Office is also expected to announce further financial sanctions on Moscow banks and ban all Russian-linked ships from docking at British ports.
The US has joined the European Union and Canada in closing its airspace to Russian planes. The US Justice Department's also looking to seize the yachts, luxury apartments and private jets belonging to wealthy Russians with ties to President Putin.
A 15-year-old girl has been seriously injured in a shooting incident in Liverpool. Merseyside police responded to gunfire in Toxteth just after 5 o'clock yesterday afternoon. A 21-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder.
A report by the Clean Air Fund suggests World Health Organization's air pollution targets could be achieved in the UK by 2030 if environmental policies are delivered on. Campaigners say it would be a win-win, helping to cut infant deaths, reduce coronary heart disease, and it would benefit the economy.
The government has announced a £260 million investment in medical research and drug manufacturing. The Department of Health says patients will benefit from cutting-edge advances and treatments, ensuring the UK is at the forefront of medical research. Seeing reports there today that Roman Abramovich, the Russian oligarch who is the owner of Chelsea Football Club, is looking to offload his assets in Britain, including various homes that he owns, and you're getting a report about a potential buyer for Chelsea.
Swiss billionaire Hans-Jörg Wyss, I hope I pronounced that correct, has confirmed to reports which are on the Press Association website this morning that he's been approached to buy Chelsea. He is, as I say, a billionaire from Switzerland and has been offered that chance to buy the football club. Of course, it looks, anyway, if that is the case, as though Abramovich is trying to
offload his assets before they're seized.
Exactly.
And that will apply to so many people, particularly in the London area within the M25.
London grad.
They've got so many properties and whatever. And there's big areas of Surrey, for instance, where I think you'll be finding a house bargain. A £30 million one will probably cost 18 million or so now. So international sanctions have been placed on Russia. And as this war continues to escalate, but it's unclear whether or not this will stop them from continuing the invasion. But his take on this, let's go to John Peet John is the Economist politics editor on all of this. The Abramovich situation is interesting, John. I reckon he'll not be alone in trying to offload assets.
No, I think you're right. We may see quite a lot of prime property in Belgravia, in Hampstead and around Surrey coming on the market, because the risk is that if sanctions continue to be tightened, some of these people may lose these assets altogether.
The UK government got the guts to do that, to actually follow through?
Well, you have to follow the law here. I mean, it's quite tricky just to confiscate property which has been legitimately acquired. But as we've seen very slowly over the past few years, as things have tightened on Russians, we also have laws that say you have to show how you got your money before you buy these assets. And if you can't show them, then you can forfeit the asset. So I think it's going to be a tough time.
Yeah, interestingly, we've got Bill Browder coming on the programme a little bit later this morning. He was once the biggest Western investor in Russia. He's also Putin's allegedly #1 enemy. He's been talking to officials in the States and in the UK on how exactly to help UK PLC find those hidden Russian assets. And the suggestion is that they're going to try and force prisonable punishments if people don't come forward with information on those hidden assets. I mean, do you think that will make a big difference?
Well, I think, let's wait and see. These assets are usually held through holding companies, often in the Virgin Islands. It's difficult to identify who the ultimate beneficiary owner is. There's a whole chain of connections, and there are a lot of lawyers involved. So it could be a slow process. But, if we get to a point when sanctions on individual Russians are genuinely tight and are applied, then it's going to be quite difficult for a lot of these Russians with links to Putin. Of course, what's also happening is that many of these so-called oligarchs are now saying, we don't support the invasion. We're on Ukraine's side in this. Indeed, some of them, like Mikhail Friedman, were actually born in Ukraine. So it's not straightforward. And the idea is to put pressure ultimately on Putin at home through some of these people to say, look, this is a big mistake, and you need to find some compromise.
OK, John Pate, appreciate your take on things. John's the political editor at The Economist. Thank you very much indeed. The latest from Ukraine, Mark White across that. He's our security editor.
Well, we just had the latest intelligence briefing from the Ministry of Defence here in the UK. Always very useful because they have clearly assets on the ground. They have their satellite imagery. They are in constant contact with the Ukrainian military on the situation as it unfolds. And what they're saying is that there are reports of the Russian military having taken over the southern city of Kherson. They are appearing with what they say to corroborate those reports, suggesting that Russian forces have been seen in the centre of Kherson, but they add that overall gains by the Russian military have been limited in the past 24 hours, and that is this ongoing issue, it appears, with logistics, the logistics supply chain of getting these forces resupplied and fueled as they move into some of those urban areas across Ukraine is seemingly proving quite difficult for Russian forces. And also, according to the UK Ministry of Defence, they say that the way in which the Ukrainian military is fighting back is also hampering those Russian forces from taking over some of the urban centres across Ukraine. The upshot of this, according to the United Kingdom Ministry of Defence, is that the Russian forces are switching tactics to one of bombing and airstrikes on urban centres increasingly. A lot of the tactics apparently is to increase the shelling and missile attacks in the overnight hours, particularly targeting areas, the second largest city of Kharkiv, which would again tally with what we're seeing in terms of the images that have been coming out of Kharkiv. A university building in the centre of Kharkiv is the latest building to have been struck. This is not far from the Interior Ministry building or the local government administration headquarters in Kharkiv that was struck by missiles yesterday. So a university building in the centre of Kharkiv struck by missile attacks overnight, and images of that building burning. But as I say, the very latest intelligence briefing from the Ministry of Defence here in the UK saying that overall Russian gains appear to be still pretty slow. They haven't gained their objectives, the objectives that the Russian forces were initially trying to achieve, according to the UK MOD. But it has resulted, apparently, in a switch of tactics, which is seeing missile strikes, such as the one on the university building in the centre of Kharkiv, and also bombardment and missile strikes on other residential areas. And that breaking news line, the issue on Kherson, that southern city of about 300,000 people, where Russian troops are apparently now in the city centre.
OK, more breaking news as well. Whilst Mark has been speaking, President Zelensky of Ukraine has been giving an update on the situation. He says that almost 6,000 Russians have been killed since war broke out 6 days ago. He says that Russians are trying to erase Ukrainian history after hitting the Babin Yar Holocaust Memorial yesterday. That, of course, was to recognise the deaths of some 30,000 Ukrainian Jews who were shot by the Nazis in 1941.
Those are incredible numbers.
They are incredible numbers, yeah. Of course, they're not independently verified, but that is the Ukrainian claim that some 6,000 Russians have been killed. Further, he goes on to say that Ukraine says Russia cannot win Ukraine with bombs and strikes and rockets, and he calls for support to Ukraine's EU bid. He says there is no time to stay neutral. So those are the breaking lines from President Zelensky in the last few moments.
But it's not going to happen, is it? The European Union is not going to say, come on board with us, you're our responsibility now, and we're going to fight Russia.
Well, it's already unprecedented in terms that there's unanimous support for it, but it's famously slow. That's what the EU's always been criticised for, being famously slow. And in this moment of crisis, whether or not they'll be able to change is the big question. But yes, if it is, as we say, correct, 6,000 Russians have been killed, how will Vladimir Putin break that news to his citizens at the moment? Those soldiers are being sent to a portable
crematorium. That's what they have as well. But I mean, this business about words, State of the Nation speech last night from Joe Biden in Washington, and his big headline phrase was, freedom will always triumph over tyranny.
What does that mean?
What does that mean? And is it true? You know, it's...
Well, it doesn't seem to be true when children are being bombed in Kiev.
It's like people say, it's like when people say, oh, I believe in karma. Karma will catch you out. Rubbish.
Well, lots of people
too many evil people. No, it's rubbish. It's complete rubbish. There's too many evil people.
There's a lot of evil, and you know, you've got to... Well, anyway, let's not go into our foreign policy. But, you know, there's lots of questions about the way the West is handling this. We'll keep asking those questions throughout the course of the morning. We're going to take a quick break. After that, we'll be looking
approaching
at
7:30. As a matter of fact, it is now exactly 7:30, and we're going to be back because there is big political implications in the sporting world as well, and what happens next. And we're going to be with Paul Coyte after this. Don't go away.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for...
Breakfast with Eamonn.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
This Ukrainian situation, so much effect on so many parts of all of our lives. And we've got Paul Coit now here to talk about sport. And it could affect the club that many people support, Chelsea in this particular case, because we're reporting this morning that Roman Abramovich, the owner, is looking for a buyer.
Yeah, it's not really a surprise because over the last couple of days we've seen houses he's selling. It looks like he's expecting sanctions and he's preparing for that.
Yes.
But the question was, is the club going to go? And what happens to the club? You know, there was the situation where it was the charitable organisation when having a look after it. They weren't happy with that. And also then it's also whether legally that's allowed to happen. So it seems that Abramovich is saying, right, OK, who wants to buy Chelsea? But then we're talking about how much this is going to be, because we are going to be talking billions.
Although, will they be getting bargains, you know, because they're in a rush, these Russian oligarchs, to get rid of their assets. So someone can snap up Chelsea Football Club
Does that mean, would the government actually own it if they were to seize it?
I really don't know. This is the thing. It's completely up in the air. There's this story, Swiss billionaire Hans-Jörg Wyss claims he's been offered the chance to buy Chelsea, so it sounds like they've gone to him.
It's on the market.
Instead of people coming in and going, well, I'm interested. He's 86. So really, whether Chelsea is up for sale, it seems so. But where's the money go? Does the money then go straight to Abramovich? He moves away. That's it. I'll leave it to someone else. And also, as far as the club's concerned, they were the first really, well, I would say that a huge billionaire has come in and turned the club around. Of course, it's happened with Manchester City. We know it's happening with Newcastle now. But where does that leave Chelsea Football Club in terms of going forward and in terms of how much money is going to be spent on it? So it's up in the air, but we'll see.
Paul, I just want to ask you about these high-profile international sports stars from Ukraine who have signed up for the fight. I mean, obviously, the Klitschko brothers, probably the most famous one of whom, well, the mayor of Kiev. But now we're hearing another Ukrainian boxer has signed up to fight the Russians, and indeed a national tennis player.
Yeah, Vasily Lomachenko is another fine boxer who's now gone back as well. The tennis player, Sergei Stakhovsky, he beat Federer, I believe, in 2013 at Wimbledon. We've got to number 31 in the world. He's retired now. He's age 36, and he's decided, you know, he's going back as well. So there's a lot that are. Alexander Usyk, even. And he's the boxer that beat Anthony Joshua for the world. I mean, this is the world heavyweight champion of the world. So that's two worlds. So anyway, but he is going back as well. So there is the pull to go back and fight for their homeland, you know, and it's whether it be... It's a tricky one because even if you look back in wars, look back even in World War II, how sports stars were used, they weren't so much used to actually go back and fight, but they were used in front of the public, used for morale. So maybe that's how they're going to be used. But it seems that from everything they're saying, if they have to go back and fight, that's what they're prepared to do.
Meanwhile, let's get back to business. FA Cup last night, and Middlesbrough have claimed another big scalp. Well, they kicked us out.
You know what? I was laughing at you.
Middlesbrough.
And now it comes back.
Maybe karma does exist.
Yeah, there you go.
Maybe it does.
We didn't even get to penalties last night, Eamonn. You know, at least you got to penalties.
Well, look, in fairness, before you and I sort of sit and lament our own teams, Manchester United and Tottenham, Middlesbrough, you got to hand it to them.
They were terrific. I mean, they were as bad as Spurs were.
What a run they're having.
Middlesbrough, yeah, absolutely. And I thought they looked terrific last night. And there was only going to be one side in it. By the time We got to extra time. This is really late for me. You know, I'm usually asleep by 8:30. I'm thinking, OK, we'll stay up, see how it goes. Kept going. Great winning goal, and certainly deserved it as well. So
but also,
well done to them.
there's a guy there that used to be on Man United's books, Paddy McNair, Northern Ireland international, who could put some central defenders at Man United to shame at the moment in terms of form.
And
it's hard to believe that Leicester clocked up their first league win last night.
First league win of this year, of 2022. They really haven't been looking good, and I know Leicester fans that were thinking, oh, no, away to Burnley, this is going to be a nightmare. They're tough, they're rough. This is what we just don't seem to have the fight. But they did, and they looked really good last night, Leicester. So good 2-0 win for them. Jamie Vardy comes back, but also it makes a difference, not only the fact that he scored, the fact that he's back with the club.
And just a word about Peterborough. They held City until half-time. It was 0-0 at half-time, and finally going down 2-0.
The only team I've ever played a professional game for.
Really?
Oh, really?
Peterborough United. Chris Turner gave me 20 minutes against Aston Villa.
How much did they pay you for that?
Knows how much I paid. Ron Atkinson said, who's the stupid, I can't even say the word in public, let alone on the TV, wearing number 11. And that was the highlight of my life.
I'm proud of you.
You never stop surprising us.
There you go.
It.
So that was
Thank
it. So
you.
Peterborough, I do have an affinity then with Posh, but 2-0 they lost. A lot of people thought it was going to be 6 or 7, including me. I'm very pleased. 2-0 they got away with it.
Good story. Well done. Thanks, Paul. Thank you very much.
Well, as the tension between Ukraine and Russia continues, many British people have been helping Ukrainian refugees fleeing their homes.
Well, across Britain, people have been donating everything from money to clothes. People are volunteering as well. So many good people out there. We thank you for all of this. And so many local charities involved. And we're going to go to our reporter, Anna Riley. She's at a church in Hull. And Anna, tell us what they are donating or what is going on or who's involved in all of this. Good morning.
Good morning, Eamonn and Isabel. Yes, I'm here at the Living Hope Church in Hull. There's an appeal being set up by a Facebook group it started out as called Hull for Ukraine, and it comes as there's over 600,000 refugees now that have fled Ukraine according to the UN, and the European Union is saying there could be up to 4 million people fleeing the country. They're going to neighbouring places like Poland and Romania, but these people are leaving with little more than just the clothes on their back and the possessions that they can carry. So community groups like this one here are getting together, asking the public to donate those essential items that you need in day-to-day life. Your toiletries, nappies if you've got children, blankets to stay warm in the cold conditions they've got in those countries, and clothes and dry food as well. And this group has just been amazing, the response. I was here yesterday and there were hundreds of bags of donations, and the volunteers giving up their time as well, packaging up the items to get them sent off to the countries. Poland in particular is the first place that they're sending these items to. And I spoke to Magda Moses. She's the lead volunteer at the group Hull for Ukraine, and this is what she had to say.
I mean, I always believed in Hull people, and they've got big hearts and they share love with everybody. So I am overwhelmed by the response from the community, and this is just so international response. It's not just Polish, Romanians or something. Every single probably nationality that lives and represents our city came to support. I don't want to talk about politics. It just hurts me as a human being, as a mother, as a friend. I've got family and friends in Ukraine. I was brought up only 150 kilometers away from the border. You know, no war is good. No war is good. And when you see people fleeing the countries with one bag, little children walking for thousands of miles, you know, we know we need to help. I mean, if you at the doorstep of the military situation like this, of course you'll be worried. And like we say, this is just the beginning. Where it's going to take us, Ukraine, and the whole Europe, we don't really know.
He's got 2 children, same.
Some really touching words there from Magda, and just a phenomenal response from the community. This appeal is going on for 2 weeks for now, and what Magda's also asking for is help with transport to get these goods across to Poland. So she's asking if anyone's watching that can provide transport. Their group is called Hull for Ukraine on Facebook, and she'd really appreciate any help.
Anna, there will be, because there are so many good people. Somebody somewhere, they'll have a lorry, they'll be able to provide that transport that you're looking for, and all the good things that people have donated. Goodness me. Thank you very much indeed, Anna. Riley there. If you are organising something in terms of aid and support for refugees and all those people who are displaced, please do.
Yeah, we want to hear
know.
all of those stories. And I have to say, we've been covering this tomorrow. It will have been a week since war broke out. And aside from the shock and the horror that we're seeing in Ukraine, there's also been, in stark contrast, those really uplifting, positive stories of humanity, people being welcoming, generous. And we want to tell those stories as well. So whatever you are doing, however small, let us know. Get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk or at GBNews.
It's things like sanitary things, you know, like toothpaste and, you know,
sleeping bags,
and,
socks, hot water bottles, whatever it is.
Yeah, you're right. All those sort of things as well. Absolutely awful. Let's go to the break. We're going to be back with the newspapers after this.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at the front pages of the newspapers on this Wednesday. Shunned by the world. The Metro's leading with that. More than 100 diplomats leaving the room as the Russian foreign minister spoke by video link at the Human Rights Council.
The Telegraph reporting President Zelensky pleading with Western nations to prevent what he calls a genocide in his country.
Here's the Mirror, leading with President Zelensky's defiant call that nobody will break us as he spoke to the European Parliament yesterday.
The Times reporting on Putin's comments that people should leave Kyiv now before a bombardment begins.
So David Miller now, part of our newspaper review team with Claire Muldoon. David, we've just been talking in the last 20 minutes about it looks like Roman Abramovich is trying to offset his assets to just, get them out of the country in case they're going to be seized. And Chelsea Football Club, your football club, which you've supported for 50-odd years, is one of those assets.
Yes, and I was, a very close associate of Ken Bates, who had the club from the early 80s to the early 2000s, and in fact, had director's privileges at the club. In other words, no statutory responsibilities. But I used to sit with Ken, and I remember when this whole thing came up, and I have two minds about Abramovich, right? The first thing is he's plainly closely associated with Putin, and on any proper assessment of the word is a criminal and should not be there. Equally, he's been a good custodian of Chelsea, and there will be plenty of Chelsea fans who'll be sad to see him go. But what he can't do is issue, as he did last weekend, some spurious statement that he's going to give it to the charitable foundation. No saying, I'm really sorry about what's happening in Ukraine.
No mention of anything.
No mention of any of that. And he just thinks he can shelter his asset. Well, I think he's come to the end of the road.
Well, I think this is... Do you know what? I think it's probably unusual to hear a football team supporter speak like you have, because how good has his stewardship and his money and his investment been for your club? I mean, absolutely incredible. Who were you before he came along?
Well, no, it's not quite true, Eamonn. And by the way, you should declare your interest. You're a supporter of Manchester United, owned by people who you don't have to be Russian to be
that's a whole
decidedly
other story.
Dodgy. And anyway, but look,
what I'm trying to say is, will there be a lot of Chelsea supporters who will be really worried about this as to who their team could end up in the hands of?
Yes, I'm quite sure. And one hears now some 86-year-old Swiss billionaire, maybe he is a billionaire, maybe he isn't, not even a household name in his own front room, and we're expected to be ecstatic about being bought by him. But look, at the end of it all, Abramovich is an unacceptable owner of a football club in the UK. He has, all kinds of rumours circulate about him. I don't know whether any of them are true. He's a bagman for Putin. He's this, he's that, and the other. What is certainly clear is he wouldn't even mention a word of criticism of Putin, and I think that is despicable.
OK, Claire, to you, what story would you like to choose?
Well, we're talking about independence, and Scotland is always talking about independence under the Scottish Nationalist Party and their leader, obviously, Nicola Sturgeon. This is a story that's in the Telegraph, and it's been touched on in other papers as well, on the back of Nicola Sturgeon yesterday announcing that she wants to donate £4 million worth of help and donations to the Ukrainian embassy in Edinburgh, to make sure that gets to the people who need it in the Ukraine at the moment. But we find that Mike Russell, the SNP president, compares Scotland to the Ukraine, as did Kirsty Thompson, the SNP MSP for Falkirk. And she said in a really crass tweet, which has since been deleted, she said that Michelle Thompson responded to images of President Vladimir Zelensky signing an application for the Ukraine to join the EU with a social media post stating, "Delighted for Ukraine. It just goes to show what political will can achieve. Remember that, Scotland."
Armed resistance.
Oh, come on.
England being Russia.
But
yes,
should we contrive an invasion then of Scotland by Putin? Would that be a way forward, do you think?
I just think back in the real world, David, let's focus on these stories you've chosen, Telegraph and the Mail, talking about this isn't the Vladimir Putin I once knew, and don't back Putin into a corner, and that's because he's an incredibly dangerous man.
Yeah, now this, you see, part of the purpose of having newspapers is analysis. Mark Armand, well-known academic in these security issues, has the op-ed piece in the Daily Mail, and he basically reminds people that Putin, as an impoverished young man, was very proud of all the rats he caught, and is worried that effectively Putin is a cornered rat, and Putin is capable, he says, of doing things that we need to take account of before we start getting too involved in this, particularly those of us who believe, as I certainly do, that the pressure on Putin from within his own encampment will be great as the Russians become deprived of all the things that they think their corruptly obtained wealth can do. Now, can I also point you in the direction of an article by another man I greatly respect, Tony Brenton, who was a British ambassador to Russia, very sensible guy. Now, this is interesting. I had thought, says Tony Brenton, he was a rational actor. If he is not, then we should take his nuclear threats seriously. Basically, he says, when he arrived in Russia, I think it was 10 or 12 years ago, He thought that Putin was a tough man, but he thought, like Margaret Thatcher, he understood what was going on. He was very realistic and rational. And now he isn't. And when you look at the hysteria over what he says about Ukraine, you know, the abuse, Zionists, the abuse that drug addicts, Ukraine is run by drug addicts. The fact this man is within 2 inches of a nuclear button is a worrying thing.
And you take that nuclear threat seriously then?
Yes, not so that we sort of back away from him and are frightened of him, but we take it steadily and in stages. I mean, it was very moving, obviously, when this Ukrainian woman had a pop at Boris about the no-fly zone. But, you know, if we get involved in a no-fly zone and shoot down Russian aircraft, that's a declaration of war.
But we did sign
and we don't have to do
in
it.
94 to say if you give up your nuclear weapons, we will defend you, and we're not honouring that.
The thing I'm not sure that it's the same as we were. Look, at the end of the day, what we cannot afford to do is to provoke a man who is a Looney Tune, as he's becoming. And I think, look, the sort of people that surround him, they don't surround him because they love him. They surround him because it's, as I think was described by the Americans many years ago, an organised kleptocracy, Russia, where all of these people make a fortune out of ruthlessly exploiting their country. And then they go and spend it all over the world. As they find it more and more impossible to go and spend it, they'll be thinking to themselves, do we need this Putin? And the answer is, of course,
you're talking
they
about
don't.
Putin being surrounded by people. They had the visuals over 2 days ago of Putin sitting on a desk almost as large as this one. Here's a man who takes the risks to, you know, invade Ukraine, who is moments away from pushing the nuclear button, we would think, and yet, personally,
Frightened of COVID.
He's frightened of COVID. He's not willing to take any internal risks. There's a huge schism here.
There's massive comparisons to the last days of Hitler here. Locked up in the bunker, paranoid about everybody around him, having people bumped off who didn't agree with him, and never accepting that they were going to lose.
But go on. It's the unpredictability of Putin that is really, you know, that's the key here, because no one knows what he's going to do next.
And I suppose the question is, you know, this can't come from the West. It will have to come from within Russia, any form of sort of palace coup. Nobody seems to be talking about Alexei Navalny, who was the opposition
he's now
in Russia and doing very badly under lock and key at the moment. But if Putin was to be toppled, there'd be big questions about who would replace him and what would happen. Would he be replaced by another one of his henchmen?
That's the point. But coming back to an earlier matter we discussed a bit ago, what is disappointing is the absence of what I would call any powerful non-aligned voices putting pressure on Russia to stop what is a vicious and unlawful,
China? Like India,
vicious
Pakistan?
and unlawful attack. Where are these people who are?
Why are they so quiet? Why have they gone quiet?
Yeah, when what is happening? Two awful things are happening. First of all, the invasion of Ukraine, which is totally unjustified. But secondly, making war on a civilian population, which is illegal.
Yeah. Yes, and Putin, it said, will be tried by The Hague if he survives it. If we survive it.
Claire, let's get back into
domestic matters.
News,
yeah.
And we're talking about trying to get an appointment with a doctor. Very, very difficult. I mean, farcical, actually. How did it when I was a child? How were you able to pick up the phone and say, Eamonn's got a tummy ache, can you come and see him, doctor? Yeah, we'll be up in 45 minutes.
Or you would have a home visit even.
That's what I meant.
And it seems to be
listen
less.
To me, that's what I'm saying. The doctor used to arrive and
or you
sit
would,
by your bed.
I always listen to you.
Rub your tummy and whatever. So how do we then get the stage that you make the same phone call and you say the doctor will see you in 3 weeks' time
I don't know.
at a surgery?
I don't know. There's been a 20% decrease on face-to-face GP appointments and since the pandemic, since January.
So the solution?
Well, they're saying 6-day-a-week surgeries from 9 to 5, i.e. opening them up on a Saturday, which I think is a really, really good thing to do.
Except we had a dentist in here on Monday and he said the same thing was offered to them. And he said the pay was so paltry and the extra workload was so much that nobody took up the
he was saying
offer.
there weren't going to be more staff. It was just more hours, and it was the same people that would be doing the long
but they're not
shifts.
seeing the same amount. They're not seeing the same amount of people. There has been a decrease in face-to-face. What they're doing is kicking the can of the problem of seeing people of illnesses down the road, and it's ending up in the A&Es. And that's where it's ending up.
Exactly where it's ending up. Even the dentist in the dentistry's ending up in the A&Es, particularly amongst kids and whatever. So what would you do?
Well, I would still go for the 6 days because people need to be seen. And the absolute travesty is we are victims of our own success, really, because what we are doing is we're self-diagnosing, aren't we? We've got a couple of symptoms. What do? Dr. Google. Oh, I think I have. Yeah, and then add into that the legality. The people, doctors and practices are so scared of being taken to court in case they misdiagnose or miss symptoms that they're going to be sending everybody off for loads more tests, loads more whatever.
Yes,
and it's
but
again...
what we need is more doctors,
Yes,
so therefore
and we need to
more
retain
patients,
them.
and we need more staff in the surgeries in terms of receptionists and whatever it is, not to be sent to an automated phone line and told that 3 weeks is what you're going to have to wait, which is pretty normal.
Well, is it? It shouldn't be normal. If you've got if you on a 2-week referral for cancer, you get the 2-week referral. The clock starts ticking once you've seen your GP. And to be fair, I do think if you present with symptoms that are precluding cancer or would deem to be cancerous, then you will be seen. The clock will start ticking in the NHS. You will be seen within 2 weeks, and then you've got the pathway beyond
more
that.
doctors, more auxiliary staff within the surgeries.
And it needs to be better managed. It needs to be better managed. The NHS is crippled under mismanagement at the moment.
And retaining them is a huge problem. So many medical friends of mine have upped sticks and gone overseas where doctors are looked after better.
Not only that, but a lot of them now are taking early retirement.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Definitely are.
Because of the stress.
Yes, yes. And who cares for the carer? That's the old adage.
Who cares for the carer?
Many problems.
You know, actually, doctors are renowned as having a higher rate of alcoholism
and suicide.
Suicide and
drugs.
Because they've got access to...
I know, and a definition of alcoholic is someone who drinks more than their doctor.
Yeah, very well. Well, and on that thought, we'll go to the break. We'll thank Claire and David. They'll be back again at about 20 to 9. Hope you can join us for that. And then join us right after the break for the latest from Ukraine.
Good morning. A rather drab Wednesday for most of the country. Rain and drizzle on and off in many places as well, but western parts of Scotland will again enjoy some cracking sunshine. We've had high pressure nearby. It's starting to pull away though, and this low is taking over. It's been bringing cloud and rain up from the south through the night, making for a very different day today across North Wales, especially the North Midlands, rain trickling into northwest England and Northern Ireland. Clouding over across central and southern Scotland through the day, but we should hang on to some good spells of sunshine across the far north. Not too much rain across eastern England, a bit damp and drizzly in places this morning, but generally just a cloudy afternoon here. And the rain should peter out across South Wales and southwest England at times. And temperatures in the southwest, 11, 12, maybe 13 Celsius. Elsewhere, we're looking at high single figures, not feeling very pleasant at 8 or 9 in Manchester with that rain on and off through the afternoon that pushes northwards across Scotland through this evening. So we will see the cloud increasing across the far north. And then another line of rain just starts to edge in from the west as we go through the early hours. And that will stick around during Thursday. But with a lot of cloud, a fairly brisk breeze, it isn't going to be a cold night, a much milder night, certainly tonight across Scotland compared to the night just gone. There will still be rain around, though, on Thursday, a fairly soggy start across Scotland. Then this line of rain sitting across northwest England, East Wales and the Midlands. Some uncertainty about exactly where that's going to lie tomorrow, but it will bring a pretty soggy day down the central slice of the UK. Either side of that, something a bit drier and a bit brighter, and with some sunny spells. Again, double digits possible across the south, single figures likely further north. And again, if you're stuck under that rain band, it's not going to feel very pleasant. That rain will still be around into Friday, but slowly easing off. Many of us looking like having a dry weekend, but strong signals it's going to get colder through the weekend into next week.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Overnight, Joe Biden delivers his first State of the Union address on day 7 of the invasion of Ukraine. He told Washington, freedom will always triumph over tyranny.
Good morning, it's 8:02 on the 2nd of March. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
We're broadcasting across the whole world on your TV, on radio and online. And here's what's leading the news from the UK this morning. In his State of the Union address, President Biden has stated that Putin is more isolated from the world than ever. We'll speak to the man dubbed Putin's #1 enemy, Bill Browder.
On the ground in Ukraine, new reports this morning of Russian paratroopers landing in Kharkiv and a renewed bombardment of Kiev and Zhytomyr after a US defense official announced that the convoy north of the city has stalled.
All of that comes after a speech by the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, which prompted a mass walkout at the UN Human Rights Council. You can join in those stories, giving your views and any of the discussions we have here in studio, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet at GB News.
Okay, as always, we're going to start our programme this hour with the very latest from our security editor, Mark White. Bring us right up to date, if you will, Mark.
Good morning, Isabel. Good morning, Eamonn. Another very busy morning of events unfolding in Ukraine. The latest lines coming through from the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelensky, saying that some 6,000 Russian military personnel have been killed by Ukrainian forces. Now, we've no way of independently verifying those claims. This is, though, coming from the Ukrainian President Zelensky, and the British Ministry of Defence, other Western intelligence agencies also suggesting that that may well be the case. It may be, in fact, adding to the issue in terms of the missile and shelling attacks on urban centres across across Ukraine. We have seen in Kharkiv overnight missile strikes which have targeted a university building in the centre of Kharkiv, a building burning, and next to that a police station which was also struck. We've managed to verify these images which show a real significant level of destruction. Now, we don't at this stage have reports on deaths and injuries, but as the day progressed yesterday, as far as Kharkiv was concerned, there were significant numbers of fatalities, some 21 dead and more than 100 injured in that city because of the shelling. From Kharkiv to the city of Kherson, the southern city of Kherson, according to the UK Ministry of Defence, which has been carrying out its own intelligence analysis, it appears to be corroborating reports that Russian forces have entered Kherson, that they are seen in the city centre of this southern city of some 300,000 people in the south of Ukraine. There is supposed to be, or reported to be, fierce fighting in and around the town. Now, the Russian Foreign Ministry suggests that it is in control of Kherson. However, Ukrainian forces say that they are still not in control of Kherson, that Ukrainian forces are putting up stiff resistance in that city. In terms of other shelling, well, an act of genocide is what the Ukrainian forces are describing as a missile attack that hit a residential area in Zlodimir, which is west of the Ukrainian capital, Kiev. Imagery from that scene showing fires burning well into the night. Reports initially of some 4 deaths, including a child. There may be more casualties, though. Rescue services cutting their way through the rubble, looking for any survivors, and of course pulling out, as they have been apparently, bodies from the scene. Now, there is a military base, the 95th Airborne Division, which is not far from this residential complex. It may be that that was the target and not a residential area. However, the analysis from the UK Ministry of Defence, and indeed the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace, is that increasingly we are likely to see civilian areas, residential areas, urban areas targeted as the Russian tactics change because of those heavy losses that are apparently, according to the Ukrainian president and his military, being inflicted on Russian forces. That is bringing about a change in tactics, with Russia, we are told, increasingly going after urban areas in terms of his shelling. And all that, of course, is leading to an increasing humanitarian crisis. The latest from the United Nations High Commission for Refugees is that 660,000 refugees have crossed the borders into Baltic countries, crossed the border of Ukraine into Baltic nations. In Poland, the government there says 450,000 people have crossed into Poland alone from Ukraine in recent days. There are tents set up, reception centres set up at various points along what is a long border between Poland and Ukraine to try to look after those thousands upon thousands of people spilling over the border. So 450,000 refugees have spilled into Poland. 660,000 in total have gone into other countries, including Romania, Slovakia, and Hungary in recent days.
So let's now find out about the motivation with Vladimir Putin and what sort of man he really is. In the past week on this programme, we have had him described as a gangster, as a madman as well, criminally insane.
Hubris syndrome.
But now we're going to find out from a man who knows Putin very well. Putin knows him very well, but they've never met. What are Putin's incentives? What is he really trying to achieve? Human rights activist and author of the book Red Notice, How I Became Putin's #1 Enemy, Bill Browder, joins us now. That's some claim, Bill, his #1 enemy.
Well, I think he's probably got quite a few #1 enemies at this point. But back when I wrote that book, I was the one he was targeting more than anybody.
Why was he targeting you?
Well, it's a long story, but basically, Putin's regime killed my lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, who uncovered a massive government corruption scheme. And I wasn't ready to let it go. And so I went to Washington and I got a law passed called the Magnitsky Act, which imposes visa sanctions and asset freezes on Putin and his regime for human rights abuse and corruption.
You were the first person that was able to get the Americans to impose sanctions on Russia for 35 years.
Yeah.
I mean, don't skip over that. That was
Right.
a huge achievement.
Well, and in fact, that's why he's so angry, because, and actually that moment in time connects to where we are today, which is that Vladimir Putin is not like any other head of state. He is the richest man in the world, and he stole an enormous amount of money from the Russian people He keeps that money in the name of oligarchs offshore.
Does he enjoy that money? What can he actually do with it?
He's got $1 billion house here, $100 million yacht there. He's got all sorts of stuff scattered all over the world. And he understood from that moment that I got that law passed that all of his money could be frozen at any time. And he got so angry with me for that he chased me around the world with death threats, with kidnapping threats, with 8 Interpol red notices, because he was just, I had found his Achilles heel. He commits terrible crimes in Russia for money, and then he keeps that money abroad, and that's his weak point.
How seriously do you take the idea of a death threat on you?
You can see. Alexander Litvinenko, Sergei Skripal, and those are just the household names in London. I could Boris Nemtsov.
So you're frightened. You're careful.
Well, I'm careful, but I'm not frightened. If you fear is what he wants you to feel. Mm-hmm. If you express fear, if you feel fear, you regulate your own behavior. You don't do what you're supposed to do. And then he's achieved his objective.
So, look, you've won accolades around the world for the 34 countries that have taken on the sanctions that you brought through the Magnitsky Act. Could you have imagined the sort of sanctions that the world have taken in the last week, stuff that you've been campaigning for? We heard President Biden last night in that State of the Union address saying that Russia is more isolated than ever before. This is significant. This is huge.
It's dramatic. I've spent 10 years banging on closed doors. It's been unbelievable, particularly in Europe and here as well. It wasn't until the Salisbury poisoning of Sergei Skripal that the government finally relented and allowed the UK to have a Magnitsky Act. And the European Union was just unbelievable. It was like I was walking into a room, they just wouldn't, they just wanted me out. Yeah. They wanted me out. The Germans, the French, they didn't want to hear it. It was just so upsetting to them to talk about doing anything to hold Russia to account. And now here we are in the last 48 hours. The European Union is blocking Russian aircraft. They're sanctioning Russian oligarchs. They're freezing the accounts of the central bank. It's unbelievable. And it's timely because, Vladimir Putin, what he's doing deserves this and a lot more.
But look at Donald Trump shaking his hand there, wanting to be his buddy, wanting to be best mate, reportedly over the weekend calling him a genius and whatever. Trump knows, all these world leaders that gather at the big G7 conferences and whatever, they know he's a murderer. They know he's a gangster. He's like mafia, isn't he?
There's no question. And he is a mafia boss with all the powers of a sovereign state. And there's absolutely no question. And I've seen it with evidence. The guy is involved in major financial crimes. He is involved in major murders. He's involved in covering up murders. He's involved in chemical weapons attacks. The guy is a mafia may be an understatement. He's a terrorist. Yeah. He is a terrorist. He's no better than Osama bin Laden.
Now, look, you spent a lot of time in Russia. As you say, you were the biggest Western investor in that country. You've got a huge knowledge of the country and also now, through your humanitarian work, great expertise of how best to hurt the Russian state. The Americans and now the British Parliament are calling on your services at the moment on how to target many of these assets that have been hidden very cleverly by Russian oligarchs. And there are some suggestions that you may have been giving advice on how best to try and get people to come forward. What are you advising the government at the moment?
They're starting to call me the oligarch hunter. The situation is this, that the oligarchs knew that this moment would come. And so it's not as if, some of them are very blatant in their ownership of assets, and others most of them have employed lawyers and accountants and specialists to hide things behind shell companies, behind this, behind that, et cetera. And so my proposal to all the governments at this point is to amend the law to say that anybody who has played a role in helping them hide their assets, and be that a lawyer, an accountant, a banker, now has a legal duty to come forward and provide information on how the structures work, where the assets are, et cetera.
Interesting. That's a game changer.
And would that involve the law to change here in the UK?
It would require. So right now, you need to strengthen the law in the UK to make that happen. And if that were to happen, it would totally change the whole climate, because all of a sudden everybody becomes an informer on these Russian oligarchs.
What support have you got for that bill?
I think everybody says, why don't we have this? It's kind of a no-brainer, right? It's right out there, and it's if we're trying to go after the oligarchs, we need to know where their assets are. And to know where their assets are, the best people to tell us where those assets are.
There's another way of going after Putin, which would be more direct and would probably involve a bullet to the head or whatever. Does he live in fear? You were talking about you living under the threat of losing your life. Does he do the same?
Well, he's a scared little man, and you can just, for such a quote tough guy, for him sitting at this long table, 30 feet away. I mean, that's just the worst image he could generate to the world. He's scared of his own people. I just read a story, I don't know if it's true or not, that he lives in a bunker now in Siberia with his family because he's so scared. He's looking around for treachery wherever he can find it because everybody in Russia would he's bringing the country into ruin. He's making Russia into North Korea.
Well, I mean, he was so popular with Russians, wasn't he? For bringing stability after the Yeltsin years. That was his big trump card, right? Yeah. And in 1 week, he's destroyed the ruble. He's blocked people getting cash out of ATMs through all of our sanctions. I mean, the Russians must be beginning to wake up to who they've got running their country.
Well, you're exactly right. So when he came to power, in a moment of where there was like hyperinflation and food lines and just horrible stuff going on. And his big pitch was, with me, everything's going to be okay. Maybe you're not going to have the same freedoms, but materially you're going to be better off and everything's going to be calm. And without me, it's going to go back to that chaos. And here we are, 22 years later, and he has single-handedly, unilaterally created the chaos for every Russian citizen, and it's just remarkable.
So if the coup comes, it will come from within?
Well, I don't think that we have any ability to regime change, and we've already tried that in a lot of places and it doesn't work. It's the Russians' job to get rid of him, and of course he's going to put up every possible barrier to prevent that. But it's the reason why he's in Ukraine is not because of Ukraine, not because of NATO. It's because he's afraid of being overthrown. He's a dictator who saw the writing on the wall. He saw in Belarus, 18 months ago, there was a attempted revolution. It didn't happen because of his intervention. In Kazakhstan, there was a successful revolution. They got rid of Nazarbayev, who was a dictator who had been there longer than Putin. And Putin said, if he doesn't do anything, he's going to be in the same boat as all these other guys. He better do something. So what does a dictator do who's been in power for 22 years when he knows the writing's on the wall? He starts a war. Comes straight out of the dictator's playbook. He starts a war because nobody replaces a leader in the middle of a war. Some people rally around the leader, and that's his play. He's living on borrowed time. At some point, the Russian people, and we don't know what will happen, how it will happen, but at some point they're going to say, wait a second, this is just not right. And
unless, and the picture of the man that you are painting sounds like a man to me that would press the button.
Well, that's the terrifying thing, is that he would press the button to save his own skin.
So if he's going down, we all go down with him.
Right, that's the problem. And I should also point out, and this is the thing that really is the most upsetting part of this whole story, is that Ukraine is just an intermediate step. As I said, he doesn't care about Ukraine specifically. It's just a tactical move. If he were to have gotten Ukraine in his plans, 2 days blitzkrieg, everyone surrenders, then the next stop would be Estonia or Latvia or Lithuania, and he would really like to challenge us, UK, US, to see whether we're ready to go to war with Russia to enforce Article 5 of NATO for a country, at least in America, that maybe 2% of the people could even identify on a map.
Yeah.
So the way to stop his war machine is to stop buying his gas, is to go after his oligarchs, to make his oligarchs so unhappy with him that he has to change his playbook, right? We're already seeing, though, people like Abramovich here in London, the owner of Chelsea. We were hearing reports that he's trying to sell Chelsea quickly. Will the law in this country, in the moves that we're talking about, move quickly enough to be able to tackle and target the oligarchs so that war machine can be stopped before those things happen that you described?
No, the law here is slow and burdensome. The oligarchs are swift and nimble. They're working with their lawyers, 24/7 right now to come up with plans and schemes to hide their assets. But in a certain way, that's not the most important thing. If I look at this thing broadly, how do we stop Putin? The first thing we do is we supply the Ukrainians with everything they need. So the Ukrainians are really the heroes in this story. The Ukrainians are the buffer zone between Putin and us. And so if we don't want to have a direct war with Vladimir Putin, we should do everything we can in every way possible to assist the Ukrainians.
And are we, do you think, doing enough?
Well, I mean, we you know, I have a lot of criticisms of the British government, but in terms of supporting the Ukrainians, we've been there probably #1 in the whole world in terms of supplying anti-tank missiles, in terms of training them, in terms of doing this well in advance of everybody else. And so we are doing that. But there is one thing, and this is very controversial, but I'm going to say it. This is the elephant in the room. In 1994, we asked the Ukrainians to give up their nuclear weapons. And we said, if you give up your nuclear weapons, we will protect your territorial integrity. It's called the Budapest Memorandum. The United Kingdom, the United States signed that, along with Russia, with Ukraine. And here we are, their territorial integrity is being threatened. And so, you know, they're begging us for a no-fly zone. And I understand the scary idea of shooting down a Russian plane. But, I mean, if we don't, they're going to be firing on Estonia pretty soon, and then we're going to be in a direct war with Russia.
Yeah. Bill, how does this all play out? Where does it go? I mean, he's finished on the world stage, whatever happens, win, lose, or draw. I mean, he can't go and meet world leaders and people shake his hand now from here on in and give him the respect that he may crave. Where does it end? How does it end?
It could end a lot of different ways. Let me tell you how it ends in his mind. It ends in his mind that he goes to the border of Poland or the border of Estonia. He says, "Are you ready to go to war with me?" And we all look into ourselves and say, and by the way, he threatens nuclear war at the same time, and we say, we don't want a nuclear war with Russia. You can have all of the Warsaw Pact countries, the Soviet countries. Let's just draw the line, no nuclear war. And then he sits on top of this empire, and we have to deal with him as a mean adversary. That's his like, you know, evil view of the world. And that's what he's trying to achieve, is he wants to basically sit on top of an empire and have us not like him, not respect him, but fear him.
Could China be the key to resolving all of this?
No, China will be the key to prolonging this. So, you know, we've cut off the Russian central bank. Every business is now curtailing their activities in Russia. SWIFT is banned. Oligarchs will have their assets frozen, and they're going to need a lender of last resort. And you can be absolutely 100% guaranteed that the amoral, immoral Chinese will be, and they're not going to do it for free. They're going to be smiling and rubbing their hands together and say, yeah, we can lend you a bit of money, but the Chinese will be there to bail the Russians out. And from our perspective, I mean, so I've told you what Putin's best scenario is. Our best scenario is to squeeze and starve the war machine in Russia so they just don't have the money to do it. That's how we won the Cold War. If we cut them off completely and absolutely, and that requires the Germans tightening their belt and finding other sources of energy so that they just don't have the money, then he has to grind to a halt.
It all boils down to money. Sad but true. Bill Browder, fascinating talking to you and listening to you. Thank you very much indeed for your perspective on everything.
Thank you, and stay safe as well.
Yeah. Well, look, the time is coming up to 25 minutes past 8. The headlines are these today. Later today, you'll have Prime Minister's questions time, and Boris Johnson will update MPs in his talks with allies in Eastern Europe as the UK looks to put more pressure on Russia over the invasion. Foreign Office is also expected to announce further financial sanctions on Moscow banks and ban all Russian-linked ships from docking at British ports.
The US has joined the European Union and Canada in closing its airspace to Russian planes. The US Justice Department is also looking to seize the yachts, luxury apartments and private jets belonging to wealthy Russians with ties to President Putin.
A 15-year-old girl has been seriously injured in a shooting incident in Liverpool. Merseyside police responded to reports of gunfire in Toxteth just after 5 p.m. yesterday. A 21-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder.
A report by the Clean Air Fund suggests World Health Organisation's air pollution targets could be achieved in the UK by 2030 if environmental policies are delivered on. Campaigners say it would be a win-win, helping to cut infant deaths, reduce coronary heart disease and benefit the economy.
OK, so that's your roundup, that's your news on this Wednesday. New survey suggests almost 2 million people may have paid for private health care during the pandemic. I don't think this is what I'm going to be talking about now. I think we're going to be talking to Liam Halligan. Liam, it was interesting talking to Bill Browder there, where everything, it seems, comes down to money, and money is your business. Liam's our new GBNews economics and affairs editor on all of this. Right, so how's the whole Russian-Ukraine situation playing out on the financial markets?
Well, we've just seen oil go up again this morning. It's $111 a barrel. It was just $70 a barrel back in December. So we're going to be feeling that on the forecourts when we fill up on petrol and diesel, unfortunately. But what I wanted to talk about this morning, Eamonn and Isabel, is Western businesses in Russia. You've got a lot of really big blue-chip Western businesses working in the former Soviet Union. We know that BP and Shell have both moved to sever their huge ties with Russia.
Yeah.
BP owned 20% of Russia's largest oil company. Shell had a massive gas project in the far east of Russia.
What does that do, my friend? It makes them look good, but someone else just moves in and gives Russia all the money needed for that, don't they?
Because they have the oil and gas that the world desperately needs. It's not just BP and Shell, though. We're now seeing other big thoroughbred companies saying that they're suspending their Russia operations. I'm talking about like Ford and Boeing, which have been in the Russia, even in Soviet days, for
Apple and
decades.
Sony and
Apple and Dell, Daimler, the huge German car company. Renault has huge operations in Russia. They're all now suspending them. I doubt they'll sell the assets for now, but they're suspending them, they say, indefinitely, but we don't know. But it's actually what the story that really caught my eye last night and this morning is that you've got the huge global shipping lines. Maersk, you've got the Ocean Network Express in Singapore, you've got the Swiss shipping line MSC. These companies move millions, tens of millions of containers around the world every year, including in and out of Russia. Russia, the world's biggest wheat exporter, remember. They've now said, all those companies, and also Hapag-Lloyd, which is a huge German container company, they're blocking Russia. They're not going to take stuff into and out of Russia.
This is quite brave because this is costing them money.
It is.
Yeah.
But they feel that, the public opinion in the West is there's such ire, there's such concern about what's happening in Ukraine. They're saying for now, at least, they are not going to take shipping freight into and out of Russia. The word blockade springs to mind, which is obviously a very loaded and emotive word that's linked to the Second World War. But I can't really think of a more accurate word to use, Eamonn and Isabel, about the actions of these shipping companies.
Sort of on a tangent, I mean, obviously these are deliberate decisions against Russia at the moment for many of these businesses, a sort of moral decision. But what about those businesses with assets and companies in Ukraine that simply can't function, that can't operate? I mean, just 1 week ago, people in Kiev, for example, were in Zara, were in restaurants eating pizzas, all of which have now closed down, many with Western ties. Is that hurting us at the moment?
It's definitely hurting the companies involved. Look, let's be clear. Ukraine's a market of almost 50 million people. Russia's a market of 150 million people. These are major consumer markets with burgeoning middle classes. There are 32 Marks and Spencer's branches in Moscow.
Right.
This is not the Soviet Union. There are major business and economic links between our countries now, and it's very difficult for Western companies, whatever the atmosphere in the media, whatever the politicians are saying in the House of Commons, in State of Union addresses in Washington, D.C., it's very tough for them to instantly up sticks because they've driven down such deep roots since the Soviet Union collapsed in the early 90s.
Well, I reckon there'd be a lot of eyebrows raised if Marks and Spencer continued to trade in Moscow.
I think there would be.
There must be a lot of moral pressure.
There is a lot of moral pressure. But when you've got the world's major shipping companies, literally the top 3 shipping companies in the world saying we are not going to move freight into and out of Russia, it sets a pretty high bar. When you've got Shell selling their stake in that massive Nord Stream pipeline from Russia to Germany, the world's biggest undersea pipeline. It sets a high bar, but that is where we are. This is obviously a Russia-Ukraine military conflict, but when it comes to the economics, this is an East-West conflict.
Yeah, and it was really fascinating to hear what you say, tying up with what Bill Browder said there as well, that the only language Putin really understands is money, and cutting it off from him, that hurts.
You know, I talk about these things with trepidation, Eamonn and Isabel. Obviously, there's a humanitarian crisis going on. Obviously, people in Ukraine are worried for their lives, for their children's lives, and some guy comes on and talks about money. But throughout history, war is also about money. Money as a weapon, money as a way of curtailing war and winning wars. It seems pretty clear to me the West isn't going to put boots on the ground, but we've definitely declared economic war on Russia.
Liam Hannigan, thank you very much indeed. With the time 8:31, we'll take a break. We're back with what's inside the newspapers right after this.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Thanks for getting in touch with us today on this Wednesday. You're waking up to breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel. And a lot of people are now waking up to the fact, because it's really heartening to hear, that we are online. And that means that we're streaming around the world. So we're live on your TV, we're live on your radio, we're live, well, there's lots of places we're not live, like YouTube and things.
Yeah, but you can also watch us on the app.
Yeah, the app.
Which is really good. If you miss the show, you can either watch it live as you go about your day, but you can also watch all of the shows back via the app, which is really worthwhile doing if you miss any of your favourite shows.
And obviously, in all humility, we've got to thank you, without blowing our own trumpets, the increase in viewers and listeners here to GB News has multiplied sixfold or so since the start of the year. So thank you very much indeed, and I hope we repay our faith in you as the biggest growing breakfast channel in the UK. So forget the rest. Here's where we are. You know what they're going to do. We don't even know what we're going to do. So stay with us, because anything can happen.
Yeah, I suppose what we do differently as well on The Breakfast Show, we love to hear from you. We ask you to get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We also ask you to get in touch via Twitter @gbnews. You can take a look at some of the emails coming into us this morning and see what you've been saying, because we've had a full coverage throughout the morning on the ongoing situation in Ukraine. And of course, you know, it affects
Isn't
all
Bill
of us
Browder
here.
a fascinating man to listen to? And he just said it as it is. And I mean, increasingly, I think it's hard to be polite about Vladimir Putin. I mean, I was talking to you about giving him his proper titles and doing this and that, but guest after guest who know this man basically just say he's lost it. He is a madman. He is a gangster. He is worse than a mafia leader. Bill Browder described him as a terrorist.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find the best comments on that. Sorry, you're going to have to keep talking while I try and find you some
Aleppo
response.
and the situation in Syria, I mean, there was supposed to be a red line drawn by the USA as regards chemical weapons and barrel bombs and all these sort of things, and that was let go by the West. Is what we're experiencing now. Did Putin take advantage of that, and did he actually think, well, they're all talk?
Yeah, that red line was crossed, wasn't it? The world changed.
Was crossed, and that's why I refer to Joe Biden's State of the Nation address last night, and basically he says, freedom will always triumph over tyranny. He said, I think that's rubbish. I just think that's a platitude. It's just words. It means nothing. Show us your red lines, Joe.
Well, look, lots of reaction coming from that interview with Bill Browder, the author of Red Notice, Putin's #1 enemy. This is from Bill Petherick. He says, Eamonn and Isabel, thank you so much for your excellent interview with Bill Browder. So much was simply explained to us about the situation. Excellent, thanks. The same from Freddie Can. He says, what a good interview. Makes you really think. Keep up the good work, GB News. He also said, ask the public to inform on the oligarchs. We know where one property is that's owned by one. I'm sure there are many other members of the public who also know. One other point no one's mentioned, the space station run by America and Russia.
Yeah,
that's from Chris Manwaring.
That was something we may still talk about before the end of the programme today, and if we don't, we'll do it tomorrow. But the idea, would the space station only exist with Russian cooperation? They supply the booster rockets, which actually stops the space station falling down into Earth's atmosphere, so they can press buttons and then it boosts back up. So could that be taken over or not?
Yeah, we are going to look at the whole Russia issue, aren't we, at some point here on this programme, also talking about Elon Musk's involvement. He also wants to provide satellite intelligence for the West during the invasion.
You're talking about Russian involvement, and I think an area that many of us forget is ordinary Russian people and how wedded to this war they are. I think they're victims in a lot of this as well. I was lucky enough to film quite a lot in Russia, particularly Moscow, over the past 3 years. And I tell you, I just came across people who wanted to be westernized. That's really what they wanted. And I can't imagine they want any part in a war that would take over Ukraine and all the awfulness that's involved.
20 million Russians live in poverty, and the situation with the economic sanctions, it is going to affect those people the most. They're going to be struggling to get money out of the banks. They're going to be able to afford food in the supermarkets, and this is all thanks to their leader. Look, we have more analysis throughout the day. So many emails from you coming in. We do really appreciate hearing from you. Keep them coming.
The Russian side of things, the Ukrainian war reflected all over the front pages of Wednesday's newspapers, and this is how they stack up. Shunned by the world, we lead with the Metro, and that is its headline. More than 100 diplomats left the room as the Russian foreign minister spoke by video link at the Human Rights Council yesterday.
The Telegraph reports that President Zelensky is pleading with Western nations to prevent what he calls a genocide in his country.
Here's the Mirror leading with Vladimir Zelensky's defiant call that nobody will break us, as we spoke to the European Parliament yesterday. I mean, he is emerging with this. He
is.
Absolutely. But, you know, there's the real story. There's the story there. Look at that child there. That is just another child at a camp in Poland yesterday, a refugee camp, having fled Ukraine. And already we hear the amount of deaths with children already. Certainly 13 confirmed, but there will be much, much more. Look, let's take a break, and we're back with Who have we got? David Miller.
And Claire Muldoon.
And Claire
for the
Muldoon.
papers.
Going through those after this.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
That you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Claire Muldoon and David Miller with What's Inside the Papers. Good morning to both of you again. David, we continue the Russian invasion theme. This is in The Guardian, page 4 of The Guardian. Russian missile strikes you're going to talk about here.
Yes, this is from Luke Harding. You know, there are some journalists that, you know, one tends to believe more than others, and Luke Harding is an expert on Russia and has been there for a lot of years. Headline, Russian missile strikes to target civilians as Putin wages psychological warfare. One of the things that's absolutely clear is that he's now wants to intimidate the entire general population. Now, that is illegal, but I don't think niceties like legality is going to bother him that much. But just one paragraph, if I may, from what Luke has written. Yesterday, Russian missiles, this is in Kharkiv, Russian missiles struck numerous targets with no military value. They included the Opera and Ballet Theatre, the recently opened zoo, and a hospital. And this is a war on a civilian population, which is brutish and awful, and once again leads to the point, at what point are countries not involved directly in NATO and whatever, going to push Putin?
Right. Name me what countries you're talking about there.
India, Pakistan, a whole, some of the African countries, ones which are thought to have some moral stance. And, you know, that is the voice that's missing at the moment. I mean, India abstained in that vote condemning Russian aggression in Ukraine. You've got to say, what are they playing at?
Going back to your story in The Guardian, and you say that these bombings, these missile strikes were on targets of no discernible value. But if you bomb a zoo or a university or a hospital, whatever, it's got psychological value, I presume.
That's the point, I think. What they want to do is intimidate the civilian population. Of course, the awful thing is Ukraine is not a wealthy country. You just look at all that damage.
Yeah.
They knocked out all of the radio facilities because what they don't want are the people of Ukraine to receive independent news from within their own resources. So, I mean, the cost of rebuilding that country is going to be astronomical.
I suppose, Claire, the downside for Putin of waging a psychological war is the outrage it invokes in the West. We saw yesterday the front of the newspapers, Polina, the 11-year-old girl that was shot by Russian saboteurs. Today we've got more children on the front of the newspapers, maternity hospitals being targeted, cancer,
There's
children in
damage.
bunkers. But should children be collateral damage in a war?
Well, you can't stop it, I don't think. And children make the headlines. That's what we're seeing. But everyone is reporting now. Everyone has mobile phones. Where is the footage? Why is it not getting out? You know, we always talk about embedded reporters. Where are they? We've got BBC representatives. We've got Sky representatives.
But there's nobody embedded.
Well,
there's nobody embedded.
We were told there were no embedded journalists because the Russian attack is so indiscriminate, and it's basically a suicide mission for any journalists. And although many would like to do that, no news organisations want to lose them.
We used to have the protection of the Red Cross and MSF Holland.
Yes,
where are they? You know, where are these NGOs? Amnesty International has been very quiet, actually, as well, on what's going on. So, in terms of news sources, where are they coming from? Do we trust them? Can the people of Ukraine trust the news that they're getting? And look at the poor people of Russia. They are queuing up to get their money out of the ATMs. And don't get me wrong, I do think the way to get to Putin and his ideal that he's got is to get them where it hurts, and it hurts them monetarily. They need the money, and if we stop everything, that is the way to get to them. But it's usual, you know, it's the innocent people who are going back to the times before Perestroika and Glasnost. They're going back to queuing up for food. Russia's a beautiful country. They hosted the World Cup. They were getting there. And now look, and this is all down to despot Putin.
Exactly so.
David, you've chosen this story inside The Guardian, page 5, about the military convoy. Plans that were confirmed, or suggested at least, by the Ukrainian ambassador in London yesterday, that the strategy of Putin is this so-called siege and starvation of the civilians.
This is one. I mean, there are many fascinating aspects of this, and it's lucky, I suppose, we can sit here and can think fascinating thoughts without feeling there's going to be a shell around our ears.
Yeah.
But Peter Beaumont, in his analysis, says vast military convoy points to plans for a siege and raising fears of a stark rise in casualties. Yes, but why is this 14-mile long? 40-mile long convoy? Sorry, what's in a number? Quite a lot. Why is it being left there? Is it because the Russians want it to be left there, or is it because logistically they have actually run out of the way of actually handling it? And there's plenty of evidence that, you know, tanks have run out of petrol and stuff like that. But the other problem is, although we were sending quite a lot of anti-tank missiles, whether they've used them all apparently, but I suppose they would say that in the British newspapers, the British ones have been effective. Why are they not attacking these things if they're sitting ducks?
Well, we talked to an expert about this today, and partly the military analysis seems to be that they are there as a temptation, a decoy, or distraction to the Ukrainians, so that they will deploy what they have of an air force or their reserves on these, while the real potent attack happens elsewhere. But I agree with you. I would fall for it. It's sitting there. You cannot miss. You literally cannot miss. Why wouldn't they just start blowing up 40 miles of Russian
Well, I would have
resources?
thought so. And you don't need to blow up that many in order effectively to stop them from moving.
They can't go off the road at the minute because apparently spring is soft and the ground is wet.
But this seems to me to be interesting because, you know, what we can see from our newspapers, although a lot of criticism comes in from newspapers, immersed in them as I've been for the last several days, is a lot of very good analysis and also a lot of good facts. You see, you take the Daily Mirror, not always the greatest source, I would say, from my point of view, of objective information. But you see, here's an interesting one. It's a list of reasons why Russia is so powerful in terms of its control of energy. And here's a question. Russia supplies about 40% of the EU's needs in oil and gas. Isn't that horrendous? That it's not new news that Putin is an irresponsible and potentially very, very dangerous blackmailer.
What I think is
Why is he doing it?
Obnoxious and terrible is whoever thought it was a good idea to hand him that amount of control. And capitalists have decided this, or politicians have decided this, or there's been some corruption involved in deciding this. But energy security is something that we are all lacking in, and we should, after this, take this more seriously, I would have thought.
Absolutely. And, you know, I have been banging on about this for months as well. You know, the fact that we have denationalised our energy sources. We're being sold energy to the highest bidder. That's the one good thing I think the UK has done in part of Brexit, to remove themselves from the EU hold on this. And then we need to look at alternative ways of, you know, sourcing our energy, I think.
But when many decades ago I started my ministerial career as a Minister for Electricity, I used to go on a grand tour of these huge power stations, these huge coal-fired
in the UK
power stations in the UK, and they've all gone. Now, there are people who say, wonderful, but I'm not sure whether I wouldn't take the risk of a bit more global warming in order to get Putin off our back.
Okay. Do you agree with that? Let us know. Tweet us at GB News. Claire, David, really appreciate it. We'll see you again soon, hopefully. Thank you for your input this morning.
Now, the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelensky, says Russian forces are escalating their attacks on crowded urban areas in what he calls a blatant campaign of terror.
Now, obviously terrifying for those who are unable to flee, those people who are sitting in their basements. We're going to cross now to Bucha. This is north of Kyiv.
Yeah, Alex Pavlenko joins us there, close to the Kyiv International Airport. Very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. Look, Alex, I understand you are trapped there because your car went into the garage just before war broke out, and you're there with your wife, your 4-year-old son and your 6-year-old son. How concerned are you that President Putin is warning people to leave Kyiv because he's about to begin bombarding the city?
Okay, good morning to everybody. Actually, we are fighting here and we are not making any concerns because a lot of my colleagues and friends, they already moved to western part of Ukraine and abroad. And if we speak about even about situation it happened today in the morning, so Russian helicopters and aircrafts, they just were killing and smashing down civilian villages here neighboring to Kyiv, such as, for example, Irpin, and so on. So currently what I saw, it was like involved Belarusian aircrafts and Russian helicopters there, if to take a look on the symbolic signs.
You've sent us pictures. Hopefully we'll be able to show our viewers some of the footage that you've sent through to us. But you've been out and about in the last few days. You've even spoken to some Russian soldiers.
This was... Yeah, excuse me. This was view from a window of my friend who sent me like recently before he made decision just to leave Bucha and to move to Romania.
Okay.
And this is like a view to Hostomel airport, and this is actually was an apartment of my niece who just received a direct rocket launch, and two floors apartment got destroyed. And this is absolutely civil building, without any indices of any resistance and so on. So they just killed a lot of civilians here. Couple days ago, they decided to scare all of us, and they decided to run to streets and typically just shut to every door and just try to kill as much as possible.
Alex, tell us, sorry to interrupt you, but I want to hear about your account of the Russians that you've spoken to. I understand that you believe that the supplies aren't getting through to some of the soldiers, that they're starving.
Yes, we currently what I see here, if you speak about civil population, old people who couldn't be moved out of that region, which is currently pretty isolated. So we are forming a list of required goods for mothers and kids, children and old guys, just to support them with some, because currently we will be expecting some leakage of food and all required hygienic stuff. And this is actually my meeting with Belarusian guys in the morning, and I offered to them to give up. They just were just asking food. And,
did you give them food?
Yes, they were looking for food because actually they sent them without any food or enough food, because maybe they were considering to have some sort of blitzkrieg here in Ukraine, but unfortunately they didn't manage to organize it and so on. And so these Belarusian guys and Russian guys, they were looking and asking for some food from local people. Of course, no local people are trying to support them because this is amazing, because they just destroyed a lot of buildings and so on. And then next thing I ask them, guys, give up and I will pass you to our army and you will be safe. So you can just, your families will see. We are not going to kill you or we are not going to harass you in any manner. And you know what these Belarusian guys told me? We cannot be afraid because Lukashenko put us, and here all these guys with whom I spoke before that. This is like the whole street, it appeared like to be like some sort of Stalingrad of nowadays, but all buildings around are destroyed, and you can imagine that this is like two road, and this is full of Russian military equipment which was burned with people inside.
Alex, I know that you said the Belarusians that you had spoken to had been assigned Chechen soldiers to stop them from giving up and you know, surrendering, as you suggested. Just because we are short on time, Alex, I just want, on a personal note, to hear about your concerns for your children, a 4-year-old son and a 6-year-old son. I know that we've got pictures of your air raid shelter that you've been in, and I know that you're armed with a pistol. Are you prepared to fight, to shoot, to kill, to protect your children?
Of course, I'm prepared. Not all enemies. My thing after what I saw here on that war, but no remorse. And if I die, it's I would like to change anything and to give a better future for my kids.
Do you think you might die in all of this? Has that crossed your mind? Are you worried that this is a mortal threat?
Believe me, our culture, I mean Ukrainian culture, assumes that first of all we are not afraid to die. We want a better future for our kids. And this means that most of us, why we were like the better warriors even during the Afghanistan war of Soviet Union there, because all Ukrainians were making a lot. Or during World War II, Ukraine has like a couple of fronts and most Ukrainians were fighting there. And this Putin was like faking everybody because all Russian Emporium was built on bones of Ukrainians. Starting from Peter First, how you call it, I forgot. And for us, it's not a lie. We want like a better future. Yes, I have like a business. Honestly, I'm in software development for 20 years. I made prominent projects and participated even in some elements of Iron Dome in Israel, for example. Yes. And I hope that my kids, even if I will need to go somewhere abroad, it will not take for some long time. I already received a lot of invitations just to move my family, not me, of course, but to France, to the States, to Greece, Cyprus, and a lot of locations. And I do believe that we will win, but yes, I agree with previous commenter that really damages which already made here is enormous.
Of course, look, incredibly difficult decisions for you to make, Alex Pavlenko. We wish you the very best. We hope that you don't have to use your pistol. Stay in touch with us. Let us know how you get on and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
With that, we'll take the break to the top of the hour. What will become of the refugees? Talking to the Shadow Minister for Immigration, Stephen Kinnock, MP, right after this.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. news is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Joe Biden delivers his State of the Union address on day 7 of the invasion of Ukraine. He told Washington, freedom will always triumph over tyranny.
Good morning. It's 9 o'clock on the 2nd of March. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
We're live right across the world on your TV, on your radio, online. Please do join us. And here's what's leading the news this morning.
In a State of the Union address, President Biden has stated that Putin is more isolated from the world than ever.
On the ground in Ukraine, new reports this morning of Russian paratroopers landing in Kharkiv and a renewed bombardment after a US defense official announced that the convoy north of the city had stalled.
And don't forget, you can join in any of our discussions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
Well, we've been seeing refugees on the Romanian and Polish borders. We can now speak to the Labour MP, Stephen Kinnock, Shadow Minister for Immigration. Stephen, just from a purely human point of view, how are you being affected by this? What do you think?
It's just so tragic, Eamonn, and I'm both devastated by what I'm seeing, but also truly inspired by the bravery and courage that the Ukrainian people are showing. Their resistance, it's a David versus Goliath conflict here that we're seeing in terms of the Russian firepower. The Ukrainians are outgunned, but my goodness, they're putting up a fight, and I am absolutely convinced that in the long run, Vladimir Putin is going to be defeated. You cannot occupy a country of 44 million people where everybody hates your guts. With an army of 150,000. He may be able to take one or two of the cities and hold them for a while, but in the end, the resistance will fight back and they will win. We have to stay shoulder to shoulder with those in Ukraine who are fighting so bravely and do everything that we can in terms of getting more weapons in there to help arm the resistance, and in terms of tightening the net around Mr. Putin and his cronies so that they are completely isolated and ultimately that they have to decide between whether they continue this war or they destroy completely the Russian economy.
Well, meanwhile, they're destroying a lot of Ukraine, and the casualties include the refugees. At least 500,000 people fleeing to borders around Ukraine, Romania, Poland, whatever. Now, you've criticised the government for not doing enough to let in Ukrainian refugees. They will say, look, we're going to allow at least 200,000 into the UK. How do you respond to that?
Well, we had to drag Priti Patel kicking and screaming to the chamber yesterday to give the concessions that we gave. So we're pleased that she's listened to Labour and that she's moving in the right direction. And there has been an extension of the family reunion policies. They don't go far enough. We think that a more extended family, aunts and uncles, for example, should be included. And then on the non-family side, we think that you should continue with a visa registration process, but it should be as flexible and fast as possible so that people can have their security checks rapidly in Poland and Romania when they come to the British processing centres there. The government has said instead that there should be a community sponsorship scheme in order for people to come in who don't have family reunion. But the problem with that is it can take weeks for these community sponsors to come forward, for the checks to be made, and we just worry that that is not doing enough to support these people who are fleeing the horrors of war. So again, we're going to have to keep pushing the government on this, and we hope that they will actually ultimately show the humanity. We've got to get the balance right between registering and doing those security checks. That's the right thing to do. But don't put so many bureaucratic hoops in place that we're not actually living up to our responsibilities as a country that wants to offer sanctuary.
I often think, Stephen, if you or I were in that situation and you had your children with you, or maybe you weren't there, and it was our partners, the mothers of the children, being on their own and trying to get into a country, you don't want all that red tape. You don't want all that officialdom. We just need to be there to be human to people. And funny, that was reflected in a poll I saw yesterday, which said 77% of people in the UK would welcome these refugees because they understand a difference with these. They're not looking at economic migrants. You're looking at people here who are in genuine distress, whose lives are in genuine danger, and probably, in all reality, have no wish to stay in the UK. They want to get here, they want to be safe, and they probably want to return to their home country.
That's absolutely right. The vast majority also, I think, will stay in those bordering countries because of Romania, Poland, etc., because they want to get back to their homeland as soon as Russia has been defeated and the invading forces have been expelled from their country, and Ukraine can return to being a land of freedom and democracy and sovereignty. So the government has to come forward with a sanctuary scheme which is very, very rapid, very, very flexible. One of the reasons I think it's right that people should register with us before coming over here is so that when they get here, we can provide them with maximum support. They'll be traumatized, they'll need mental health support, they'll need community liaison. We can put them in touch with the Ukrainian community that's already in this country. So I think it's actually right that we have that system of knowing who's coming, but it should be very light touch, very rapid and flexible. The problem with what the government proposed yesterday is it's going to be a bureaucratic nightmare with this community sponsorship route, and it's just not the right way to go. So what Labour is proposing is a rapid emergency protection visa, very, very light touch, so that we know when people come to our country that we can support them and help them as much as we possibly can. And of course, as you rightly say, Eamonn, many, many of them will want to go back to Ukraine as soon as they possibly can.
But Stephen, the one problem, this is not me speaking, this is me speaking on behalf of people who maybe can't get mental health support or various other social services, whatever. And you know a lot of them will be fearful, or they'll be shouting at the television and they'll be saying, hey, we can't look after our own people. We're in an awful situation. And I've heard you say in the past, you know, that the economy has to match immigration. Well, you know, we've got the pandemic to get over, inflation, the cash crisis at the minute, the fuel crisis. People are really finding it hard to make ends meet. But I mean, what do you say to that? I mean, the need is now, is it not?
I say that you can't get democracy for free. If you believe in something, in our values, our freedom, we have to fight for it. And sometimes there is a price to pay. But I would also say that it's not a burden to be welcoming Ukrainians who are fleeing the horrors of war. It's both a responsibility, but also a privilege to be able to step up and do something to help these poor people who are being persecuted by a gangster, a thug, a bully in Moscow. So I would say that this is not immigration, actually. It's not a question of what we would generally see as how do we make sure that we manage an immigration process. This is actually about offering sanctuary and showing that the United Kingdom is a country that believes in democracy, believes in freedom, and also will live up to our responsibilities to those Ukrainian people. We should take inspiration from them. Look at the courage that they are showing in this David versus Goliath battle, and we have to step up and support them. But I'm also absolutely clear that we've got to do that in a way which enables people to be supported when they come here, but also knowing that they will be, in many, many, many cases, going back as soon as they possibly can. So it's a unique and unprecedented situation we're in here, Eamonn, and I did think, I saw that opinion poll as well. I thought it was very, very encouraging that 77% of those polled were strongly supportive of us doing everything that we can to support the Ukrainians that want to come here.
You've been watching and listening to Stephen Kinnock MP, the Shadow Minister for Immigration. Stephen, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. So that's the refugee situation. We're going to cross now over to Mark White, our security editor, for a further update on what's been happening so far today in Ukraine. Mark.
Well, very fast-moving events right across Ukraine today. In the capital, Kiev, there have been constant air raid sirens, sounds of explosions overnight and some gunfire, but actually, for the most part, in Kiev itself, it has been relatively quiet. The Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, says that some 6,000 Russian soldiers have been killed by Ukrainians' military and civilian militia in recent days. Now, we have no way of independently verifying that, but according to President Zelensky, he says they are inflicting heavy casualties on Russian forces, and that may well be bringing about a change in posture from Russian forces in terms of targeting a number of urban areas. The UK Defence Secretary Ben Wallace saying this morning actually that it doesn't surprise him that Russian military doctrine is to surround cities and to attack those cities with artillery and missiles. We can talk about the northeastern city of Kharkiv, where a missile attack happened overnight and into this morning, targeting the National University there and the police station, which adjoins just across the street from the university itself in Kharkiv. This as paratroopers also landed in the city of Kharkiv. The local administration in Kharkiv, though, say that the city is still under the control of the Ukrainians, that they have managed to repel those paratroopers' attacks. A different situation unfolding, we think, in the southern city of Kherson, with the British Ministry of Defence confirming or appearing to corroborate reports from there that there has been fierce fighting and that Russian forces have been seen in Kherson. Now, the Russian Ministry of Defence claims that they are in control of Kherson. That has not been verified, though all we know is that there is heavy fighting in and around there, and the British Ministry of Defence suggesting that or corroborating those reports as well. Also, the port city of Mariupol, fierce fighting in and around that city, but the latest, according to Ukrainian forces in that area, is they are still in control of this vital port city of Mariupol. Zhytomyr, which is a city to the west of the capital Kiev, has come under missile attack in a residential area, which, according to the Ukrainian authorities, is an act of genocide. Now, there is an airbase not far from here. That may have been the intended target for this airstrike, but according to the Ukrainian authorities, it's come down in a residential area. A maternity hospital has been struck, and at least 4 people, including 1 child, has died. All of this has the net effect of adding to the humanitarian crisis. 660,000 people, according to the United Nations, have fled Ukraine across the borders into neighbouring countries. And in Poland alone, 450,000 refugees have fled across the border into Poland in recent days. Images that are coming out from Poland showing many thousands of people, busloads, mainly women and children, and reception centres that have been set up along Poland's very long border to try to help deal with this growing humanitarian crisis.
OK, Mark, thank you very much indeed.
Okay.
Now, the UK Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, has said that Vladimir Putin knows no limits and will use indiscriminate carpet bombing against Ukrainian cities as his forces close in on the capital, Kyiv.
Well, let's go now to Major General Tim Cross. He's a retired British Army officer, senior British officer responsible for rebuilding Iraq. And Tim, how have you been studying or assessing what's been going on with the Russian advances?
Well, like most people, I've been following it pretty closely, and it's been interesting watching these developments. There's no doubt that all the media reports and Ben Wallace and others who've been reporting on this or giving updates on this have got it right in the sense that Russia doesn't seem to have made the progress it would have wanted to do, and it's now having to change its tactics and up its game, I think, really. And it's going to be a difficult couple of weeks ahead, I think.
When you say up its game, we hear paratroopers on the ground today. What would their role be?
Well, they'll be trying to, I don't know where they've landed, but the paratroopers normally would try and seize some sort of key operational level target, an airfield or a bridge that you need to get your armored forces in or whatever. Paratroopers, of course, are very lightly armed. They carry relatively light weapons and they have limited logistics. So if they're landing, very far from the Russian front line, they've got to be linked up with pretty quickly. So I would have thought they are trying to secure, as I say, an airfield or some key terrain that opens up the ability of the Russian forces to move in and do whatever they want to do in the cities. I don't honestly think they want to destroy these cities. I know they're using artillery and missiles and so on, but I think their original intent was not to destroy them, but surround them and hope that the Ukrainians would give up the fight. They're now realizing they're going to have to do more than that. So we'll see how this develops over the next couple of days in terms of the capital and in terms of these other places like Kharkiv and the other cities they're surrounding.
Yeah, and Major General, of course, the terrible tragedy in all of this is we're seeing the numbers of civilians that are being killed, which is a war crime. And I don't know if you heard a little bit earlier on the programme, we had Bill Browder on here this morning. He said the elephant in the room is that the West signed this Budapest memorandum in 1994 when we asked Ukraine to give up their nuclear weapons. They had more nuclear weapons than most of the West as a combined. We asked them to give them up, but we promised we would defend them. Now their civilians are being bombed. They're dying in their hundreds. It's a huge moral dilemma for us, isn't it? Because, of course, Putin's a nuclear threat.
Yeah, it is a dilemma. I would say one thing, which is we need to be very careful with numbers. I noticed on your screen earlier on that the claim that there were 6,000 Russians killed. And when you're fighting like this, the numbers of casualties tend to be, for every death, there's 3 or 4 who have been injured. And every war, the casualty numbers are used as some sort of propaganda weapon. And the numbers of being killed, both military and civilian, we just need to be careful about. Now, that said, yes, you're right. We did put them under pressure. And that was for good reason at the time. I've got no doubt it was for good reason at the time. The whole trend was to try and get rid of as many nuclear weapons as we possibly could in the world. And that was, at the end of the Cold War, when we had enough of them to destroy the world several times over. The fact that we are not fighting to defend Ukraine, I know, has been an issue in the media for quite a long time. But the bottom line is Ukraine is not a NATO member. And the last thing we want is to find ourselves with NATO forces bumping up against Russians in combat, because that will widen this conflict very quickly and accelerate, escalate it, which we do not want. So we have to do all we can to help the Ukrainians continue to defend themselves and try and isolate this conflict in Ukraine and not allow it to expand.
Yeah, but, I understand what you're saying, but there must be a way that civilians can be protected in all of this. And, we've seen in other wars safe zones being created. I mean, why isn't that being explored?
And safe zones didn't work either. I served 3 tours in the Balkans and a couple of times in Iraq. And these ideas of safe zones, there's no such thing as a safe zone in a war. You can do your best to try, and you can do all sorts of humanitarian stuff. And my brigade built and ran refugee camps for quite a while in Macedonia, Albania, and Kosovo. So, I understand the emotion and I understand the desire, but we are not about to set up safe zones in Ukraine and defend them or set up air corridors to defend them. It's just not going to happen.
Your experience, unique, I suppose, in the midst of the people we've been talking about, because after the Iraq conflict, your job, you were officer in charge of rebuilding Iraq. We look at Ukraine now and we see this devastation to the infrastructure. I know you say that it wasn't in the Russian interest to maybe destroy everything in terms of infrastructure. What is it like picking up the pieces, being left to pick up the pieces?
Clearly. I mean, Iraq, let's be clear, it was a strategic failure. And I was not the senior officer, I was a senior Brit working with the Americans, both in Washington and then in Baghdad as the statue came down in 2003. And, it was chaotic. And part of the problems, which was alluded to in one of your earlier conversations, is that the US at the time thought that they could hold Iraq with around 50,000 troops and around 5,000 British troops. After the initial invasion, that's the plan, was to draw down to that sort of level. Now, Ukraine is about, it's about the size of France, about the size of Iraq. You do not hold a country like that in terms of security with less than, well, certainly several 100,000. One of the senior US generals said they needed 300,000 US troops when the counterinsurgency got going in Iraq. And the Russians haven't got those sort of numbers. So to try and hold Ukraine against continuing resistance once these cities are taken or the major fighting stops is going to be really hard. And the Russians, I think, are putting their finger into something that will be equally strategic failure in the way it was for us in Iraq. Rebuilding it means everything from rebuilding electricity supplies, sewers, hospitals, water, food, generating energy and so forth. It is a major, major task, and you need a lot of expertise to do it. Now, some of the Ukrainians will be there and obviously want to help rebuild, but for the Russians to come in and take this on, I don't think they've got the capacity to do that.
Okay, Major General, thank you very much indeed, Major General Tim Cross there. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to be discussing how Russia's decision to invade Ukraine could impact on our future in space and what's going on up there at the space station after this.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Now, Elon Musk says he'll rescue the International Space Station if Russia tries to drop it from orbit after threats to Vladimir Putin's space chief. For more on this, we can speak to astronomer Mark Thompson, who joins us. Look, a noble promise from Elon Musk. Is it achievable, Mark?
Do you know what? Actually, it is very achievable. And what we've seen with Elon Musk's SpaceX organisation is that it's got an incredible level of technical understanding and capability when it comes to space exploration. They've already proved that they can deliver supplies and astronauts to the space station. So, yeah, I think it is very much achievable. Now, fortunately, the space station is modular, so it's built with components, and it's unfortunate that some of the components that control it in orbit are from the Russian Space Agency.
It's just so unfortunate. We should just explain to people, Mark, or could you explain to people as to why Musk to the rescue, what he would be required to do, and the space station. I mean, it's called an international space station because there's international involvement in all of this. But the worry is the Russians may pull out. So what do they provide there?
Yeah, so after all the sanctions that many different countries are applying to Russia, one of the statements from the Russian Space Agency is that they might pull away from, actually physically pull away from. They've got some modules attached to the space station, and for the space station to stay in orbit, first of all, it relies upon gravity. Now, that's of course not going to change, but every so often, because the orbit of the space station gets slightly lower and lower due to drag from the atmosphere, every so often the Russian module will give it a little bit of a boost. It's like a rocket engine attached to the space station, and that gives it a little bit of a boost just to lift it back up to where it should be, and that happens every so often. Now, if they stop doing that, as has been a bit of a vague threat, then of course the space station could ultimately fall back to Earth. Now, it's not an instant, just suddenly plummet out of the sky. It will be a gradual process, and if it does, there's no control over it, and there's no control over where it's going to land. Now, it doesn't fly over the Russian territory at all, so they're saying it's no risk to them, but they're saying it could land somewhere in America, over Europe, in an uncontrolled fashion. So Elon Musk has very kindly said that, look, if Russia do pull out of the space station program, then he can supply the technology to keep the space station up in orbit.
So he would literally apply a tow line or something, would he?
Pretty much. It'd fly one of his modules up there, which has been used before to dock with the space station, and they just bolt a rocket onto the side of the space station, and using that they could give the space station the needed boost to get it back up into orbit if it needs to.
Okay. Well, it'd be such a shame, such a waste of so much progress and hard work, and I suppose it's also a model of international cooperation. It just reflects what's the cooperation that's not going on Earth. Mark, we've got to cut across you because we're falling out of orbit as I speak to you, so we've got to say goodbye. Thank you very much indeed.
Up next, Tom Harwood has the briefing. We'll be back at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching.
Good morning. A rather drab Wednesday for most of the country. Rain and drizzle on and off in many places as well, but western parts of Scotland will again enjoy some cracking sunshine. We've had high pressure nearby. It's starting to pull away though, and this low is taking over. It's been bringing cloud and rain up from the south through the night, making for a very different day today across North Wales, especially the North Midlands, rain trickling into northwest England and Northern Ireland. Clouding over across central and southern Scotland through the day, but we should hang on to some good spells of sunshine across the far north. Not too much rain across eastern England, a bit damp and drizzly in places this morning, but generally just a cloudy afternoon here. And the rain should peter out across South Wales and southwest England at times. And temperatures in the southwest, 11, 12, maybe 13 Celsius. Elsewhere, we're looking at high single figures, not feeling very pleasant at 8 or 9 in Manchester with that rain on and off through the afternoon that pushes northwards across Scotland through this evening. So we will see the cloud increasing across the far north. And then another line of rain just starts to edge in from the west as we go through the early hours. And that will stick around during Thursday. But with a lot of cloud, a fairly brisk breeze, it isn't going to be a cold night, a much milder night, certainly tonight across Scotland compared to the night just gone. There will still be rain around, though, on Thursday, a fairly soggy start across Scotland. Then this line of rain sitting across northwest England, East Wales and the Midlands. Some uncertainty about exactly where that's going to lie tomorrow, but it will bring a pretty soggy day.